is, what did I do for them to hate me? In other words, it becomes an onus on them having done something to make someone, because a lot of times hate is a reaction. But if they fear you, then you have to ask yourself, who am I that I should be feared? What do I have? So that, going back to what you said in terms of what's been put in our mind. You remember Django?
Yeah.
You all saw Django?
Yeah.
You remember when he was talking about that part of the brain that literally is an area where we are slaves, that will always be slaves because of this part of the brain? For those of you that remember the movie, there's a scene like in the kitchen or in the area where they're eating, where he's talking about, you know, these black people, there's an area in the brain that make them slaves, and they'll always be a slave. Well, that area exists. It's called the amygdala. The amygdala is a part of the brain that's located in the limbic system. The limbic system is like the middle section of the brain. You have the brain stem. Out of the brain stem grows the limbic system, and from the limbic system grows the neocortex. In other words, the limbic system is the earliest brain, the reptilian complex. It's called the R complex. It's that part of the brain that protects organs from outside things. The limbic system is where the part of the brain where you get your feelings from, and your neocortex is where you think. When you touch a fire, many times, most of the sensory messages that come to you that demand a motor response, most of the time it goes in through the, it hits your R complex, goes up to what you feel, then goes up to what you think, and you react to what happens. But when you touch a flame, that reflex makes you jump right off. That means that your R complex has taken over your brain. Say, look, we ain't got no time to feel that flame, and we ain't got no time to think about it. Get your hand up off that flame. Okay, instant reflex. That's what the R complex does. In your limbic system, where you feel, there's an almond shape that's known as the amygdala. And it's there that houses your emotions. And it's in the amygdala where whatever you have a facial expression for, shock, anger, happiness, surprise, you know, you have facial expression for that. All those facial expressions are developed coming up out of your amygdala. One of the things that hasn't been told about our experience being enslaved is that the great majority of people that were brought here were children. Because if they came into this room, let's say somebody came into this room and they wanted to enslave us. Well, for one thing, they'd kill all the elders. Because we've been free too long. You know I ain't going to submit to nothing. In fact, I'm going to spend my time fighting you back. What they would have done is just automatically ambushed us and killed us and then taken all the children. And they brought them to San Domingue, the Spaniards, which today is the combined island of República Dominicana, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. It is there where those children were broken, enslaved. They were bred and had children. Those children were born into this oppression, this ma'afa, this terroristic disaster. This is another part of the story that's never been told, about who actually were bred to become enslaved. So that for those thousands that Harriet Tubman was able to free, that she was so proud of, they had been touched somewhere along the line with freedom. They were part of a long line of Ashanti warriors or Congolese warriors that would never give up. But for those that were bred to become enslaved, those were the thousands that she could have freed had they only known they were slaves. So when I look at our people, even to this day, I love our people unconditionally. I understand and know what has happened to us. I understand and know that we have been through a situation that has been tremendously painful for us, to the point that we don't want to look at it, we don't want to talk about it. It brings back, we literally can feel the pain of our ancestors. It's called epigenetics. EPI genetics, epigenetics. Where your gene pool literally can can hand down from generation to generation an experience where you will live it over and over again. And so, I'm writing, my second book is titled Spirituality Before Religions, where I'm analyzing texts of Egypt. And I'm not going to mention one religion. Not one religion I'm not going to mention, because that's going to create trouble. I'm not going to say where Christianity got their religion from. I am not going to cite, they're called utterances. In the Bible, they're called scripture. It's called utterances. Utterance 273 and 274 talk about the Nesifiti, or the Pharaoh, ingesting the gods in order to become like them. They weren't talking about eating the flesh and drinking the blood of the god. They were talking about ingesting the majesty of the god in order to become like the god. And so when other people who knew not our tradition or our metaphor took that scripture, they made it literal, and that's where the Eucharist comes from. I can show you where almost every scripture of the Bible comes from on the walls of the pyramid text. The last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, Unas, I can show you where. I can show you the Shabaka stone where Genesis comes from. I can show you the Osarian drama where Cain and Abel came from. I can show you on the walls of King Tut where the Immaculate Conception of a Savior came from. I can show you on the walls of Ai, who was a pharaoh, who wrote the Aten text. I can show you where the Moses of the Bible really is the Pharaoh Akhenaten. Because Moses is an Egyptian word. Mes means to be son of. You have Thut Moses, Ak Moses, Ra Moses. Every major religion, from agnostic to Zoroastrian, Buddhism came directly out of Kemet. Rosicrucian, Zoroastrianism, Zen Buddhism, Confucius, all of it comes out of the African mind. And I have a great respect for the role that religion, particularly Christianity, played with our people. And I don't mean to cause harm to people, and I understand. Because can you imagine what it was like to be enslaved? Just fathom. See, we are, even though we're struggling, and even though we may be going through what we're going through, we ain't going through nowhere near anything where our ancestors went through. Nowhere near. And if you can imagine being kidnapped from your land, or you're taken away from your family, dragged across in a painful situation across land that you don't know, put into a prison, brought up onto a boat, brought to a land that you don't know, and then tortured, going through all this situation, living this lifestyle. You're searching for a way to live. See, there's two things humans try to do. There's two things that drive humans. The need to survive and the need to thrive. That's what motivates us every day. When we want to pay our rent, when we want to be able to put food on the table, we want to survive. When we want to do it with the least restrictive environment, that's when we want to thrive. We want to do a little bit more than survive. We want to be able to do it with ease. And so our ancestors, being introduced to this story of Jesus the Christ, and listening to the story, see, go into the mind of our ancestor to understand what it is that I'm saying. Because what brings me to understanding spirituality helps me understand the role that it plays. Dr. Amos Wilson, brilliant psychologist, tells us that a good organization meets its people's needs and solves its people's problems. And at that time, Christianity, under the guise of what we were going through, it met our needs and solved our problems. To know that there was this man by the name of Jesus the Christ who lived and brought nothing but love, peace, and soul to the world, would then be by the same people who he tried to help be crucified. You know what's interesting is that when we look at Christianity, we look at Christ as the hero of Christianity. But you know, when you look at Christianity for what it really is, Christ is not the hero. Judas is the hero. Because if Judas hadn't betrayed Christ, Christ would have been crucified, and Christ wasn't crucified, there'd be no Christianity. Think about what I'm saying from a drama perspective, from a story perspective. Because while he was crucified, it was his best friend, his ace boon, that gave him up. Think of the story. The night before, this Thursday, okay? He washed their feet. He gave them a meal. What I want you to keep in mind is, think from the perspective of an African that's being enslaved and treated. Think of the story this way. Not from where we are now looking back, but what was going on that plantation where we were struggling to find something that would push us to live to the next day. Something that just didn't want us to raise our hands and just say, I give up. Jesus says to some of his friends, you say, yo, come with me. I need to talk to my Father. So they go to this garden called Gethsemane. And Christ tells his friends, his boys, to say, watch out for the wolves. Don't do anything. Just let me know when they're coming. Just let me know when they're coming. And so he goes, and I mean, like this is the human part of Jesus. Now, this is the story that our ancestors are being told. Now, he's scared. Because he knows what's going to happen the next day, right? So, the brother prostrates himself on the ground. You know, and he said, Dad, please, you know what they're going to do? I'm the son. Okay, you God. You could make everything right by just standing defending. Why do I have to go through that? Help me out. And as he's doing it, he looks over and his boy's asleep. He goes over and he says, yo, fellas, man, can't you stay out? I'm just asking you. I mean, I know I fed you well, but can you get up that itis? Just stay up. Let me know when the Romans are coming. I just want you to let me know when the Romans are coming. Oh, yo, Jesus, okay, man, I'm sorry, man, it's kind of tired, man. Okay, go back, talk to Dad, man. Jesus goes back and he comes to realize, okay, God, whatever it is that you want. Now again, think in terms of our enslaved ancestors hearing this story. Because that's the point of departure to understand the meaning of this story. And why our people are still tenaciously hanging on to something. You see, because that's part of the epigenetics of our experience. Yes, it gives us hope. It lets us live to the next day. Even when you go out the street and you are afraid for your children. And even when people start doing movies or when the President of the United States says he's sending in the feds. Or when you have an entire show dedicated for an hour, Chicago in the crosshairs. Our elders who have known Chicago, who have lived here, who have loved it, and continue to love it. And who understand what makes what's happening here happen. What happens in New York that I know happen. What's happening in Detroit, in Compton. We know what has drawn this. We know what has made this happen. And everyone's trying to make it seem like there's something wrong with us. But there's something been wrong with them for over 400 years. But they haven't the courage to face the demons within. So they're looking for the scapegoat to blame. Okay? And so this is what is part of the psyche that we have to work on to understand. When our ancestors were on the plantation and they heard this story, he would go back and all of a sudden, he would hear the Romans coming. And he'd look, and they were just waking up, and Jesus walked over, right? Because he saw. And all of a sudden, out of the Roman soldiers, came his best friend, Judas, and hugged him and kissed him. And Jesus says, you betrayed me with a kiss. I'd rather you smack me. But don't betray me with a kiss. How many of our ancestors, how many of us in this room have been betrayed by a metaphorical kiss? How many of our politicians have betrayed us with that kiss? You betray me with a kiss. I would rather you just admit you don't care for me and you're abusing me to get my vote. This is what our ancestors were feeling. And it's as valid today as it was back then. It's just in a different form. You see, Mark Twain says history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. And so our ancestors on that plantation, and hearing this story and watching what was going on, clung tenaciously to this system that allowed them to live, let them go to the next day, allowed them to survive, allowed them to thrive, and fight with everything they had. There were thousands that didn't, but there were thousands that did. But the creative force had plans for the thousands that did. And the point that I'm trying to make is that as a people, we can spend our time talking about who threw us in the pit. Remember the idea of us being thrown in the pit when we were heading someplace in 525 BC? We can spend our time complaining about someone who threw us in the pit. Or we can spend our energy climbing up out of the pit. I know who threw me in the pit. I know what they did to get me in the pit. I'm not letting them off from what they did. But what I'm saying is that for every moment I spend devoted to thinking about you is a moment I can't think about me getting up out of this pit. And we're spending an inordinate amount of time making them the centerpiece. I don't care if Betsy DeVos is the education commissioner. I care that Marcus Klein is the principal. That's what I care. That's where my energy is going to go. Not to fight Betty DeVos, but to support Marcus Klein. Not to complain who put me in the pit, but to climb out the pit using institutions like the Freedom Home Academy. And after we get out of this pit, after our children become the masters and the mistresses of their future, the last thing I want to do is pay them back for what they did. I've spent too much time thinking about you anyway. When I get up out of this, you're the last thing I want to deal with. I'm going on to the journey I was on in 525. I was heading someplace. And I think that this afternoon and this evening's presentation is part of what makes all this happen. And I want you to focus on this. I want you to understand what it is that they're trying to do. They are fearful of what will happen when our children rise to become who they were born to be. That's just important to understand. And I come to you with 31 years of experience in the New York City Board of Education in South Central Bronx. Having watched our children, been with them, McDonald's. I was there when special ed was first formed. I remember the Lauer Decree. I remember in the late 70s, 77, 78, 79, when they developed the Lauer Decree, the consent decree. I remember when they were pulling the children out of regular classroom to build their special ed classes. Special ed children didn't come from outside nowhere. They came from the schools that were there. They just took the children that were tired of the nonsense going on. Saw a little commercial. There was a meme on the internet that had a little child, had a little brother looking up at the camera as if it were the teacher. And he said, "No, I ain't got no ADHD, you just bored." Now, I'm a proud teacher, so I'm not putting down the public school teachers. I really am not. That's not my job. But I also know that the system that they have developed, see, charter schools were never meant to be charter schools. I go back when charter schools first started back in the early 90s. Before charter schools existed, there was a program in New York that was called New Visions. And New Visions was meant to develop resource centers for the public schools. And I was director of social studies. We had 35 schools in our district. We had 27 elementary schools, and we had 8 middle schools. And I developed a curriculum in my particular district in South Central Bronx. There's about 30 districts in New York City with 5 boroughs. I was District 9, and I was an administrator there. And I developed the special education and the general education pacing calendar in social studies for the schools. And I used to go to the schools and do staff development. And I had moved my social studies department out of the district office where the adults are. The Department of Mathematics, the Department of Science, Language Arts, Special Education Department. All of these were centrally located in a building that was like an office building. And I said, you know, like, this is boring. I want to get out into a school. I want to take the social studies department and put it into a school, and I can become a resource for the school. And then for all the other districts, if they want to come in and do some work, whatever they want to do, they can come on in, and I'll have the material for them. So I moved out of the district, and I went into one of our middle schools, Diana Sands. And 1991, I was contacted by a group of community-based organizations. There was a Supreme Court judge, his name was Supreme Court Judge Hamza McGee. There were lawyers involved. There were community centers involved. They said, look, let's start. Let's put in for a New Vision school. Okay? The New Vision school was meant to be a resource for the public school system. Okay? 1991 we did some schools, 92 we did some schools. But all of a sudden in 1993 we started hearing, we're not calling it New Vision anymore, we're calling it charter. Here's the trick. Public schools can't sell to private schools. But public schools can be taken over by the state, and the state can sell it to private. That is basic advice. We didn't see the beast lurking in the background, because they started with New Visions. And that was to see how successful it was to create resource centers, but those resource centers now are no longer meant to support the public school. It is meant to be independent schools taking away from the public school system. But the reason why that was able to be done was because the public school system in New York was so bad, the parents wanted anything as a result of how horrific the public school is. I'm proud to be a teacher, but I have to say what I watched happen. The great majority of teachers that are in our public school system are young women of European descent, somewhere near 23 and 25 years of age. I've had them tell me themselves they teach 2nd grade. I'm afraid of my students. You're dealing with 7-year-old boys, and you afraid of them? And their perspective of when a young man might reach out and touch you, in your head, you already been violated. So you bring that violation as if that young man is thinking the same thing, and that just is not on that young man's mind, for the most part. Because I don't speak for everybody, I'm not speaking blanketly, but what I'm saying is that you got a sister in the room, a real sister, a dynamite sister in the room. She said, yo, Kwame, sit down and tell your mama. You see, Miss Jones knows what to do with Kwame. Brothers like me knew what to do with the young brothers, by matter of degree. There were times I had to deal with them in the classroom. Then there were times I had to deal with them in the hallway, by myself. Just explain to them, there ain't no bullies in my class. And if anybody gonna be a bully, it's gonna be me. And if I'm not, you certainly. And if you even think, I got something for you. And that brother looked up in my face. He said, Brother Kaba, tell me the truth. Because I love them. And I'm sorry for what may be happening in your home. But you're not bringing that poison into my classroom and impacting those other children. See, we know how to handle our own. But when they're in other people's care, then all of a sudden they got ADHD. ADD. Now we know that don't exist. well, it exists, but it's melanin. Melanin is what that is. It got people up and running, because remember, when we were in Africa, we were studying underneath the baobab tree. We were out in the open air. See, this is a cave. See, we've learned how to be comfortable in caves, but back in Africa, the only thing you did in your house was sleep. You ate outside, you entertained outside, you studied outside. Because everything you needed to study was nature, which was outside. How's my time, brother? Oh, I'm ready anytime you want.
Okay, good. I just wanted to formally introduce him because he's deserving of that. But first, I want to let everyone know I'm very appreciative of you coming out. This is just going to be one of the dynamic speakers that we bring in. What, to me, this is my personal opinion, what sets Kaba apart from the long list of speakers that I want to bring into the school is his ability not just to teach, but to apply what he has more than just theoretically. He can apply the information and to teach it. So now we're going to that third degree that I always speak of, which is actually the theory, the application, and the instruction. So the instruction to me is most important. I do videos, I watch them on YouTube. My eyes are different now because I initially saw him do something 4 years ago. And I knew then I had to bring him to freedom, which was 2 years ago when he came to the school. And his ability to teach, learning from what he's teaching and implementing that into the classroom was most important for me. So watching the lecture to me now, this last 5 years has been totally different. I watch to enable myself to instruct what I'm reading or what I'm watching or whatever. So now it's all about what can I learn from this brother. He's a master teacher. And, maybe 15, 20 years, I consider myself a master teacher as well. But first we have to do the work. Building institutions is the most important thing.
Yes, yes.
Now, but in order to build, you must have the foundation, you must have the teachers to instruct me. I can't do it by myself. So we need people to support the school, support the entities that we created. And not only that, come out and support. And if you can't support by being here, support by buying a ticket. So a lot of brothers and sisters say, well, man, I can't come, so what? Buy a ticket anyway. Because not only are African-centered schools under attack, home schools are under attack as well. So we don't galvanize our people to strengthen the fort. African-centered schools are going to be done away with. There's only a few of us around anyway. So without your support, we won't be here, period. So I was looking through the new magazine today, Just Hope. It's called Heck of Life. It's a magazine, it's an entity to create business ideas for our students. The articles are created by our students and it's produced by our students. My son Akabin has an article in this issue. We bring it out every month. It's a monthly publication. It's not frontline, so a lot of people kind of compare it to the publication I used to produce, but it's not that. It's similar in that, but seeing how great minds think alike. The picture that he had up in Napoleon's quote. Now, we didn't discuss this. I had no knowledge that he was going to run that photo, but I ran the same photo in the content section of the magazine because when I first saw the Napoleon quote and read it, it made all the sense in the world to me. So, whenever we say, well, the Europeans blew the nose off of, our structures in Egypt. And the argument is, how do you know that? Why would a European do that? What sense does that make? And Napoleon says it right there. That's right. It's a quote from him, not from a black scholar or a militant, from Napoleon himself. So, glad the brother put that up. I first saw the quote, Brother Batu Shakari was passing these, and I knew I had to first give it to my class, and then, you know, make sure everyone sees it, because there's a lot of people who doubt some of the information that we bring forth, unless it's been sanctioned by the European. Once the European sanctioned information, you know, it's validated, so it's true, right? So, without any further ado, I just want to introduce this brother formally, because I genuinely love him, like a brother, really. I need teachers that can, or I should say, that are not afraid to pass on information. And what I'm finding is, doing this since '93, there are some instructors who don't want to pass on the information unless you've been elected. So information to the elected, you know, is cool, but those who aren't selected to get this information from scholars, they don't receive it. So the young brothers have to work extra hard, you know, to get the information. So it's almost like we're moving backwards. So I applaud brothers like this. Not only do they teach, he reached out to me, we reach out to each other. You know, he wants me to get better, I want him to get better. So I want to give him a nice, strong African hand to let him know.
I thank my brother, Marcus Klein, for inviting me back to me. And what I would like to talk about in this presentation pretty much looks at everything in my research, what our ancestors were looking for in the grand scheme of things, of life, everything that they wanted to become, everything that they wanted to do, dealt with searching for the ability to become one with nature. Because they realized that if they became one with nature, there were no natural laws that they could not bring into existence on their own. It was one thing to theorize it, but it was another thing to be able to codify it, to create a formula that when practiced, the individual could then, and you see, it's called Heka. It's called Heka Life, that magazine. Heka is the Kamene word, concept, for what in English we call magic. Our African ancestors did not conceptualize what we conceptualize when we use the word magic. Heka meant the power of the natural will, to will something to occur. Have you ever wanted something really intensely and worked for it, thought about it, demanded it of yourself, do whatever you could to make it happen, and then it comes? You accomplish it. That's Heka. We spoke about our ancestors on the plantation. They willed their freedom. That's what Marcus Garvey meant when he said, "Up, you mighty race, you will accomplish what you will." And so our ancestors were after a formula that would be able to be used to come to an understanding of what you could will to happen. Some people would call it magic, but to them it wasn't bringing something out of nothing. It was something that was bringing something out of something, but that no thing was what you used in order to bring something into existence. No thing was not what we perceive no thing or nothing to be. There is no such thing as nothing to the African mind. Everything is a thing by matter of degree. And according to how you will something determines your accomplishment of it. We I do not accept the concept of they make me do something. No, you let them in your circle to impact you, to discourage you from doing it. No one, the day you stop achieving your goal is the day you choose to stop achieving your goal. My proverb is, keep on keeping on. It ain't over till you win. The concept is, it ain't over till I win. So the idea of never being able to achieve what I want doesn't exist in my mind. You will it to occur. So, in science, we're going to start with science, where we are in the classroom today, and we're going to move back into Africa, and I'm going to show you where it is in Africa. Back in the 1800s, there was a man by the name of Max Planck, P-L-A-N-C-K, Max Planck. And Max Planck came to the conclusion that there was an inner world. There wasn't a small world. There was a world that existed from the skin in. And he studied quantum physics. Now, you know, we say we take a quantum leap, but a quantum is a very small space. So when you say you take a quantum leap, it means that you have taken a small step, but it's like you've gone into or through a stargate. You've gone through something that you can never return back where you were before. Quantum is small. So quantum physics was the study of the energy or the movement of the little world, which is the atomic world, the atoms. He looked and saw that there actually was what is considered to be atoms. He called it atoms. And he noticed that this atom, the nucleus of the atom, was shared by a neutron and a proton. Neutron and proton. He also noticed that circling there were rings. And in these rings, there were what he called electrons. And he noticed that these electrons, they came in 4 major shells. This is the atoms in the bottom. There were 4. There was the K shell, the L shell, the M shell, and the N shell. Now, I can tell you this. If this is something that is not familiar to you, I can understand why. But I blame your 5th grade science. Because you see, this is part of the African methodology of teaching, which peoples of European descent don't teach us. So as we go through today's class, I want you not only to look at the content, which is what I'm teaching, but I believe that methodology and the method by which I'm teaching it is also very important. The K, the L, the M, and the N shell. Now, in the K shell, you can only have 2 electrons, which basically is hydrogen and helium. When you go to the L shell, you can only have 8. So once you get to number 3, which is lithium, lithium is knocked out into the next shell. You can only have 8 there. Once you get to the 8 or 10 electrons altogether, it kicks it out to the M shell, which has 16. 2, 8, 16. You can only have 16 electrons. And then it's kicked out. Once you get to the next, you go to the N shell, and there you have 32. This is when quantum physics was working. Max Planck. And he studied the laws of the atomic world. And he created formulas in physics for the atomic world. Came to understandings of the atomic world. And the way in which he did this was by using something in science called the scientific method, which are steps that you take in understanding how to come up with certain concepts in science. Time doesn't allow me, this is what I do in staff development, time doesn't allow me to really dedicate as much time, so I ask you to please understand why I'm moving through this in this way. But what I want to do with the scientific method is I want to demonstrate to you, first and foremost, the objective is to demonstrate how the scientific method was grounded in Kamene soul science. Now, in my presenting this to you this way, I am showing you through primary sources how the science of today is grounded in the science of the African scientists. And I'm going to prove it. And what I'm about to do right now will shut down any science group when folk are telling you what Africans did not do. That's why everybody knows. Because it's not about emotion. No emotion. This is science. Bring your work out onto the table. You're not getting emotion. This is just straight up science. The source that I'm about to present to you is work done by the great scholar, Kamene scholar, Theophile Benjamin, who was a student of the great Dr. Sheikh Diop, Egyptologist, chematologist, linguist, philosopher, historian. He deciphered what is known as the Akbos, or the Rhine, and the Moscow Apple. And what he did was he went through the model. Now, the scientific method is a model of God used to solve problems. Quantum physics is going to be one thing. The next thing we're going to do is Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay. Both the special law and the general law of relativity. 1905, he came up with the special law of relativity, which dealt with electromagnetism. His general law of relativity deals with gravity. Family, this is what we got to teach our children. We have to get into the science. It's all well and good to know your culture and your history, but if you can't apply the genius of our ancestors, that ain't none of their history. I honor Imhotep, but I want our children to become the engineers and the poets and the mathematicians that Imhotep was. Preshet, a second dynasty doctor. She was one of the most phenomenal doctors in Kemetic history. I want our sisters to understand the role of science in their lives. I want our sisters to understand not only can you handle science and math, you invented science and math. It was the African woman that invented science and math. Why? Think of the term that necessity is the mother of invention. Why would a man and a woman have to start to count? Naturally. Naturally. I'm not talking about the minds that we have today. I'm talking about the minds of the very early human beings that were trying to figure out the world around them. If you want to figure it out, go back to an infant. Look at the way an infant is. From the moment it comes from mother's womb, it is attempting to figure out the world around it. Trying to figure out who friend, who foe, who ally. Trying to figure out who do I cry for when I want this, or who do I scream for, who do I smile for, who do I, you know, what are the colors around me? That's what an infant does. Well, that's what the early human family did. They were not born with this knowledge. They attained it over time. So the question becomes, why would a man have to count? And why would a woman have to count? For men, there is no reason naturally. But for women, they go through a life cycle. A 28, 29-day life cycle. That after a while, the feminine mind began to realize, wait a minute, this is a pattern. There's a 28-day pattern in my life. There's a 29-day pattern in my life. I'm talking about the life cycle within a woman. And considering going through and mother teaching daughter and preparing civilizations, hundreds and thousands of years pass, and pretty soon this African woman realizes not only is this a 28, 29-day cycle, but this 28, 29-day cycle is broken up into 4 sections. That was the birth of mathematics. Number sense, we call it, where you learn how to count. And then, of course, you have manipulation of numbers, which then leads to addition, subtraction, multiplication, and then you deal with all of the higher levels of math. And somewhere along the line, sisters, I thank you, you let a brother sit in on class. And that's when we learned. But women were passing this down from mother to daughter for thousands of years. There was no reason. Now, brothers, this is where brothers get tight all the time. I was with you with that African thing, but now you get into the gender issue. Now we go out the problem. Brothers, we were doing great things too. And it was the great things we were doing that allowed sisters to do the great things that they were doing. So as equal partners, we were able to bring forward and usher in a civilization. Because we did what we did in our lane, and they did what they did in their lane. And then all of a sudden, sisters looked up into the heavens. And she realized that there was a celestial body that had a 28, 29, 30-day cycle. And that it also was broken up into 4 parts. And that's the moon. And every calendrical system that exists, Africans had many calendrical systems. They had the 365.25. They had a calendrical system that was 420. They had another one that was 2,160. And they had another one that was 25,000. In fact, leap year, which is interesting, at the end of every 2,160 years, they had a leap year. See, we had a day every 4 years. Our ancestors had a calendar that they added an entire year at the end of 2,160 years. A whole year. So they operated. Have you ever wondered why the month begins on the 1st, but the signs change during the 3rd week? See, we're on a Gregorian calendar. We don't know what time it is. Right. We literally don't know what time it is. We're on what Gregory did. We're tripping over the Gregorian calendar. And here we are, looking at these months right in front of us, and we don't even know what month it is. What number of month is February when we do it in the calendar? 2. What month is December? 12. How about November? But we know that's not true. Because if you go into the Latin language, for those of us who speak Spanish or Italian, what does deci mean? What does nove mean? Octo mean? So why is Deci 12? And why are we starting a month on the 1st? Suppose we went from sign to sign, instead of this created 1st of the month, which has its place in the calendar, but that's not the calendar that we judged our lives on. If we went from sign to sign, the sign from December to the sign of January would be what month? Numerically. From December to January, it would be 10. From January to February would be what? 11. And from the sign of February to the sign of March would be what? 12, which would be the end of the year. But why wouldn't that not make a lot of sense? Because what comes in on the sign Aries? Spring. So that's another new year. But that's a vegetative new year. That deals with vegetation. That deals with agricultural science. I'm telling you, these folk are ignorant. No, really, I'm telling you, it's very dangerous to go by what they do. They're heading off of a precipice, and we're following them because we believe that they are supreme. These folk never got what we taught them. Dr. Wade Knowles calls it vomit. It's nasty, I know, but you'll remember that story, won't you? Please, brother.
So as far as the Aries goes, is that what the cardinal signs come from, the 4 cardinal signs? Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, and Libra.
Because
the season starts.
That's right. You're dealing with a seasonal year. And to us, as an African people, the better you eat, the better you think. The better you think, the better you eat. The better you think, the more you produce. The more you produce, the greater the civilization. So it made sense to track the seasons. However, in Kamene, they only had 3 seasons. Well, winter, basically. You know, because you had a rainy season, and you had a windy season, and then you had the summer season. And according to how the shadow of the pyramids cast, the sun told you what season you were in. Okay? And that's why pyramids were built. They were huge sundials. Where the way in which the sun cast a shadow on the pyramid told you what season you were experiencing. Few people that look like you did this. Because there are no real seasons in the ice. You just got one thing. Gil Scott Heron said, it's winter in America. And when you're in that cold climate, you have to understand that your environment is going to decide how you perceive your creator. And so when you're in an ice climate, your creator is an angry and a jealous creator. It is a greedy creator. It is a creator that has taken from you your right to exist, and your job is to fight nature to survive. But when you're in a tropical climate and your neighbor come by and say to you, do you mind if I partake of your mango tree? Say, go ahead. Take what you want. And you give your neighbor right to the mango because you know that your creator is going to place another mango in every spot where the guest has taken a mango from, because you know that your God loves you and gives you back whatever you give sevenfold. Because wherever he dropped that seed, you're going to get something else growing. And the person that's taking the mango is not going to hoard 800 mangoes. They'll take only what they need to eat because they know they're going to come down the road where they're going to have an orange grove and they're going to shit. So you only take what you need to survive. It's so that the creator that you create in a warm climate is a loving, a generous, a creative creator that does for you and loves you under all conditions. And every so often you may have a bad season, but the creator loves you anyway. And so with this necessity being the mother of invention, sisters created the first calendrical systems, and calendrical systems are the base to all science. Everything that you build from science, whether it is the physical sciences, whether it is the earth sciences, or whether it is the life sciences, is going to come directly out of your knowledge of the heavens above. As above, so below. And so the concept of understanding Max Planck's quantum physics and understanding the scientific method comes from the fact that the first step in the scientific method is that you identify and state the problem, and you create a question. And out of that question, on the left of what you see in front of you, is the metaneta, or the hieroglyphs, that describe what on the right-hand side is where today's world gets the scientific method asking the question from the Greeks. But the Greeks got it from the Africans. And the Africans called it the enunciation, the question. It is the question of a problem of a calculation. Now the reason why I'm saying this and I'm presenting this to you because I never lose sight of the fact where I am. I'm in the Freedom Home Academy. And everything that I want to do while talking and instructing on one level, I want the teachers and I want us as parents and community to understand this is what we're teaching our children. This is what is happening in Freedom Home Academy. This is what's happening in science class. So what I'm attempting to do is to demonstrate for us what our schools should look like and the way in which we present this information to our community. This is the African-centered methodology because I am showing them the African perspective of this. Step number 2 in the scientific method. And you go into any science book and you'll see this is what they do. You gather information and you find the facts. Under other circumstances that would give me more time, I'd like to read that to you, but that the heading is, the next step is after you ask the question, you gather your information and you find the facts. On the left-hand side, you see the metaneta, or the African writing, and on the right-hand side, you see the Greek writing, and our ancestors called it the setting out, the position of a problem. You then go to your third step. You ask the question, you gather information, you find the facts, but now you state a hypothesis. You state a concept of what it is that you're searching for. And this is what's going to drive the rest of what you're going to do in science. So this is what Max Planck did when he did his piece on quantum physics, and this is what Albert Einstein did in a very interesting way. But Albert Einstein did it in a very interesting way. You state your hypothesis. You state clearly what they expect to find out. What do you expect to find out from the facts that you have searched for and the question that you have asked? Again, you see the metaneta, you see the Greek, and that's what they call the definition or the specification. The next step is you design an experiment, which is going to see if your hypothesis was presented properly. To the chemites, they call it the construction, the exact procedure with the result. Fifth step is you make observations from your experiment, you record your data, you organize, and you analyze data. Now, here's where the chemites combine 2 steps together. The Greeks broke it up into 2. Our ancestors called it the proof. And then step 6 is the state of conclusion. And that's the scientific method. That is my approach towards what I will be doing this afternoon. These were the steps that I went through to look at genetic legacy, to look at the scientific method of today, or the scientific educational system. This is what I've done in most of my work. I use the scientific method. This is why they don't invite me to places. You know, the last time they invited me to a science was at the New York Hall of Science, where I did something on the Shabbat School, which we're going to talk about tonight. And there were astronauts there, and there were a lot of people there, and during the question and answer period, they asked one of the astronauts, they said, you know, we were learning about the Egyptian origin of the cosmic universe. They said, you know, we never heard this before. And they said, you know, what do you think about it? And he said, I can't fault them. in what he presented, because that's the science that I learned about the coming into being of the universe, the Big Bang, and superclusters and clusters and galaxies and stars and planets. And he said that they were Africans that did it. And he said, well, that I can't verify. So at that point I stood up and said, but I can.
Right.
Why? Because it's science, not emotion. Not emotion. This isn't emotional. I'm not angry. We have too much to teach our babies. And I don't want to teach them in anger, because remember that amygdala is going to set in. And everything that they're going to try to learn is going to be misguided through the emotion of anger, as opposed to using the hippocampus. That's also located in the limbic system. And your hippocampus is responsible. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to ask you to do this. I want you to recall the one teacher in your life that made an impact. And you see, brother, when you did that, that name came right there, didn't it? What her name? Or his name?
Her name is Lois K. Simmons.
Lois K. Okay, can we all just name a teacher that has had that impact? And when I said that to you, how about you? Say, Bob Marcus, okay, made an impact on you, right? You can see his face, can't you? You can see in class when you're studying from, you can see what he's teaching you, can't you? You can almost, from everything, you can see it, you can hear it, everything, right? Okay. Now, what's your name? Zacchaeus. Wow, thank you for contributing, Zacchaeus. Because you made my point, and brother, you made the point. And all of you that were able to call forward that teacher like that, that is because, here's the key. I would be willing to bet you that in the presence of that person, hey, Brother Marcus?
Yes, sir.
Young student right here, man, I asked him who is the one teacher that has had a dramatic impact on your life? And who did you say?
My mother.
Bob Marcus. I know brother can't handle compliments. You're trying to deflect. But you're good, Marcus, so stop.
That's my superstar student right there.
There we go, there we go. But you see the dynamics? I'd be willing to bet you that that teacher that you could recall made you feel safe in their presence. I often tell people that if Professor John Henry Clark was a basket weaver, I'd be here teaching you how to weave baskets. Because it was just him. He was a master teacher. And in his presence, I felt safe. I felt the universe was all around me in his presence. And I'd be willing to bet that that teacher that you recall, no matter what they taught you, whatever the subject was, it could be a coach, they made you feel safe. That person taught to the part of your brain known as the hippocampus. We have to teach, and we have to start to relate to each other through the hippocampus, because your hippocampus is where your long-term memory exists. And that's why you can call it back so soon. Young student didn't have that far to go back, but you did. And the reason why is because that teacher, she, is in your long-term memory. We as teachers have to begin to strive to live in our students' long-term memory. So no matter what subject you teach, you will be recalled. You could be the lunch lady. But you could be the one to say, honey, be careful there, or, you know, how you doing in school today? Don't forget, show me your report card now, because I care about what you're getting. That could be that person. It could be anybody. I spent some time studying with Dr. Chancellor Williams back in the 80s. And Dr. Chancellor Williams told me the one person that had more impact on his life than anyone else was an ex-slave named Jed, who used to sit under a tree in his neighborhood and teach black history. And everybody thought he was crazy. But Chancellor Williams used to sit in front of him, and Jed would talk to him. Now, when I was with Dr. Chancellor Williams, he was officially blind, and he was in his 80s. But the stories he told me about Jed were so real and so alive that I understood why he became the author of The Destruction of Black Civilization. because of the nature of what he did as a teacher. He was impacted by Jeb, who was an ex-slave, who, although we didn't talk about it, may never have gone to formal school. But you don't have to go to formal school. Because I've learned more from the brother that, you know, I remember he was trying to sell me a book on Paul Robeson. He was nodding out. This brother was high. And he was nodding out. And this brother was unfolding his history and what he had done in his life going back when he was young. And this brother dropped more knowledge on me than PhDs from Columbia. In fact, I tell people I got my PhD from UCLA, the university on the corner of Lenox Avenue. I learned more from brothers and sisters in the street than I did from Columbia and Harvard and Yale. In fact, Carter G. Woodson said it took him 30 years to undo the damage that Harvard had done to him. So, as we move through this process, and as we look at these ideas and parts of the brain that we have to look at, we come to certain conclusions, and again, now, I want to show you something. See, this is science and math is beautiful. I wish that I knew when I was young what I know now. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to connect science. I am going to connect some things because as we move into the Shabbat Zone, as we move into other areas in Africa, I want you to remember the atom. I want you to remember the atomic order of operations. This is a formula, a mathematical formula. And basically what it says is that 2 times 1 squared, 2 times 2 squared, 2 times 3 squared. My bad. 2 times 4 squared. This isn't 16, this is 18. Okay? 2 times 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 squared is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. 4 squared is 16. 2 times 16 is 32. Okay, that's the atom. You're dealing with the atom. Now, the maximum numbers of the electrons that can be in K was how many? 2. The maximum that could be in L was 8. M, 18, and N was 32. Now here's the periodic table of elements. And when you study the periodic table of elements, you have families of elements. And this is what it looks like as it relates to the family of the periodic table of elements. The first family, from here to here, you have 2. The next family, you have 2, you have 6, is 8. You have subcells, which you have 2, 8. When you get down here, you have 2 families of 18. When you get down here, you have 1 family of 32, and this 23 is still being developed. These are all outside the regular that you should have. The point that I'm making is that when our ancestors developed their understanding, they saw a perfect order in the universe. Nothing is haphazard. Our ancestors saw a divine development mathematically in all things that existed. There is only one atom in our existence. There is only one atom. And everything else from that atom is multiplications of that one atom. The only atom that exists is hydrogen. When you put two pieces of hydrogen together, you get helium. When you put three pieces, you have lithium, 4 beryllium, 6 is carbon, and everybody got you scared of 666. Don't you know why they got you scared of 666? Because if you understood 666 was 6 neutrons, 6 protons, and 6 electrons, you would understand what brought life to the earth. And you'd understand that not only is black beautiful, black is the only thing that exists. But don't believe it. Let's do what I do with my children in kindergarten. Let's take out the primary colors. Let's take out a piece of white paper. What I want you to do, let's start with the color red. We're going to draw a red line. And black. Stars are now diamonds that have so come in on itself, it leaves no more space. Black matter, black energy. The black energy pushes in on the black matter, pushes in until there's no more space, and then you have an implosion. The implosion from blackness coming together in tight form creates the stars. Stars are crystallized black matter. Just like what a diamond is. Diamonds is crystallized blackness. You have 4 basic elements on our planet. You have others, but 4 major ones. You have hydrogen, oxygen. What else do you have? Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, nitrogen,
What they call it, Earth?
well, you have carbon. Okay. I just want to see you go catch the one that's the most important. Because in science, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, you can take no more than 4 to bring them together to create fusion. You can take 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, you have H2O, or you have water. You can take 2 parts hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen, you have hydrogen peroxide. You can do that with nitrogen too, but you can only develop no more than 4. But with the introduction of carbon creates the billions of molecules that exist. Carbon is what is known as the cosmic glue. Please, brother.
Okay, so how do we apply that specifically to the Kamene origin story? You said like hydrogen represented attunement in the story. So then what?
Hydrogen, well, when we get into the Shabaka story, I'm going to answer your question and then we're going to elaborate on it.
Okay.
But basically what you're dealing with is hydrogen represents the nun,
Okay, gotcha.
the water,
Right.
okay, from whence all things come. In science we call it the universe.
What would carbon represent?
Well, carbon is going to be the atom,
Gotcha.
okay, and pata is going to be the nitrogen.
Right.
And then as you get into the other philosophies of like you're going to have Nun-Nunet, which we'll talk about. Nun-Nunet is matter and space. And then you have Ha-Ha-Het, which is infinity. You have Ka-Ka-Ket, which is darkness and the light. And you have Amen and Amenet, that represents the hidden and the revealed. What's going to happen is that Atum is going to morph or transform itself into Atum Kapara. They're going to give birth to Nut and Geb. Oh, okay. No, my bad. Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture. Shu and Tefnut are going to give birth to Nut and Geb, sky and earth. And Nut and Geb is going to give birth to Asar, Aset, Nebetet, Satan, and Asar and Aset, which is the story of Earth's life, which is because you see, it's not Mother Earth, it's Mother Sky. Because they understood that life came from the light and heat energy of the sun. Geb was Earth, it was male, and Nud was female. Now I know I'm jumping ahead for some that may not go with this story, but we're going to go back now. But I just wanted to answer brother's questions because when a student asks a question in class, it's very important not to have them wait for the answer, because they're ready to hear something. Some of us in the room that has not been exposed to Shabbat Stone may not, but I excused you from having to listen when I said, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to go back. So I let all of y'all's mind drift, because I didn't want to confuse you. You see, these are little things that you do in the classroom, because when you have that student that has information that they want an answer to, they may not be able to wait for me to go into the Shabbat Stone. So I wanted to direct his, and there might be a couple of others that wanted it, but I have to let you know, you don't have to listen to this right now. Because throwing out all those words that you may never heard before might be confusing. Not that you can't handle it, but you got to handle it as it's being taught to you so that you can bring it in, which I'm going to do. All of you are going to understand what I just said by the end of this presentation. But we just have to approach it a little bit differently. So that all of this is what we teach in science today. Now, in the Old Kingdom, 28, maybe 27, maybe 30,000, wherever they said that the Old Kingdom began. Here's what I want to set into our heads. See here? You see where I'm standing? Okay, now what I want you to envision is that this is the Old Kingdom. This is like a number line where I put the Old Kingdom here, about 3100 BC, right here. Okay, now, everything that is over there happened before the Old Kingdom. Everything to the left over here is before the Old Kingdom. Everything over here is what happened after the Old Kingdom. Okay? Anybody like to do that again? Here's the Old Kingdom. Everything on that side is what happened before the Old Kingdom. Like imagine a number line with BC and AD. This is the Old Kingdom. That's before the Old Kingdom. That happened after the Old Kingdom. Here's where, as African people, we are reversed in our thinking. We are looking at Egyptian history from a European perspective. And until we start looking at Egypt or Kamene as an African thinker, we will always come up with the wrong answer. When somebody wants to oppress you, according to Dr. Sheikh Anta, there are three things they take from you. They take your history, they take your language, and they take your psychological factor. Your psychological factor are your values, your interests, and your principles. And they superimpose on you their history, their language, their values, interests, and principles. So, whatever decision you come up with in life is not going to be in your best interest, because you're looking at the world through their eyes as opposed to your own. So when we see how we're conducting ourselves, don't be surprised. In fact, it's quite natural. Think of it like this. They talk about the crabs in the basket all the time. They say we act like crabs in the basket. Okay? But you know, if you took that basket of crabs and returned them back to the water, you know, crabs actually, they stand on each other. so that the top one eats. And when the top one has dined sufficient, it comes down, goes underneath, and pushes the group up so the next one can eat. So that if you took those same crabs that act natural in a natural environment and put them in an unnatural environment like a basket, what would become natural becomes unnatural. So the way in which crabs act is quite natural because they're in an unnatural environment. Make sense? So, return us back to our place of origin. We ain't gonna act like this. The evidence of it is go back into communities in Africa that has not been tainted by Western civilization, and you'll see they don't act like this. You'll see that sisters have a place in that society, where it's not even a question of equality. Women's equality are two words that never come together in a traditional African society, because to be woman, you are automatically equal. You only have to be equal in a society that has made you unequal. In a society where you don't have a word for something, no words are created. In most traditional African civilizations, there is no word for orphanage or senior citizen home, because the idea of casting your young or your older away doesn't exist. Somebody taking care of grandma and baby girl. Make sense? Because we try to make sense here, because although we try to avoid being bitten by vampire Dracula throughout the whole movie, when he gets you and he bites you, even though you were avoiding him, you start acting like him. And I think there's a lot of us been bit by the vampire. We didn't want it, but we hear it. So, we don't understand Kemet. We don't understand Egypt because we're looking at it from a European perspective, understanding their history, their language, their values, and principles. Okay? Here's the Old Kingdom. Okay? Now, the way we look at the Old Kingdom is we say, like we're the child of the Father, which is the Old Kingdom. We say that is old, because Daddy is older than me. Okay? What I'm saying, we shouldn't be looking at Old Kingdom from here. We need to be looking at Old Kingdom from over here. Because Grandpa is old compared to his son, who's the Old Kingdom. We ought to be looking at Egypt from a Cushitic perspective, from this perspective. Because what was developed in Cush was brought to its zenith in the Old Kingdom. Because when you study history, you see that the Middle Kingdom, what the Middle Kingdom attempted to do was to revive the Old Kingdom. Nothing was new after the Old Kingdom. Everything may have been advanced, but nothing was new. When you look at the New Kingdom, which is the 18th dynasty, everybody was trying to revive the ancestors. When you get to the Napatan stage of the Kamene legacy, so-called called the Nubian dynasty or the 20th dynasty, Shabaka, who is writing or rewriting a text written in the Old Kingdom known as the Memphite text, he was rewriting it in the 25th dynasty. Now, let me put it to you like this. Here's the Old Kingdom when the Memphite text was written. Here, about 710 BC, Shabaka is rewriting the Memphite text. Here is February 11th, 2016. More time elapsed between Shabaka rewriting the Old Testament Memphite text than today and Shabaka. So that when you see Shabaka in 710 talking about rewriting the great works of his ancestors, they were his ancestors like Shabaka is our ancestors. except Shabaka is closer to us in time than when Shabaka existed and he wrote the old Memphite text. Am I clear? I'll say it again because I want to be clear, because once we capture this concept, once we understand what I'm saying right now, we will understand how inside out, upside down, we are thinking as a people in this world today. And that is why the Freedom Home Academy is a must. To turn it right side up and left side right. Because we're not looking at the world properly now. We are great people. And every great civilization creates its civilization so that the children will do better. If we're not trying to make our children better than us, we are not following the traditions of our ancestors. And I'm not just talking about Africa, because you see, okay, give me time to explain this. An African-centered curriculum really doesn't exist. There is no such thing as an African-centered curriculum. All the things that I've heard develop about Moors, about Egypt, that's not African-centered. I have to say it's African-centered. The reason why is because our ancestors in Africa were first writing the Shabbat stone in the Memphite text. They were not writing it for African people. They were writing it for a universal cosmic mind. When our ancestors created schools in Egypt, they didn't say this is for you Africans because there was only Africans in the classroom. Does it make sense? Because what I'm saying to you is the reason why I have to call it African-centered is because we were rudely interrupted. And they stole our legacy. And they put their names on it. So now that I am rescuing and researching this information, now I got to make sure I put my name on this. I have to put an African name on this to let them know, no, you did not build the pyramids. Right. You ain't had nothing to do with this. But it's really not African-centered. It's really universal cosmic information for a mind that can embrace it and take it to the next level. But we're living in a world of usurpers. We're living in a world that Obamacare is about to become Trumpcare. Anyway, not so, Shabaka stone. Pharaoh Shabaka in the 25th dynasty came upon a worm-eaten document in Memphis, and he said, it is such a great work of our ancestors, I'm going to rewrite it for all time. I'm going to write it in stone. You know the proverb written in stone? Well, that's where it comes from. The final word. So he rewrites it in stone. It has come down to us as the Shabaka stone because of the descent or the Pharaoh. We didn't call him Pharaoh, we called him the descent. And this, each one of them talks about how the universe came into existence. And it's going to mirror what I told you about quantum physics. It's going to mirror the special law of relativity and the general law of relativity. Now, what is this about? The special law of relativity and the general law of relativity are the formulas that were developed by Einstein starting about 1905 that talk about the world from the skin out, the outer world. So just as you look at the atoms and you see that you have a nucleus and then you have electrons that circle the nucleus in perfect order, the laws of relativity tell a story about how the planets revolve perfectly around the sun. Okay, now, Albert Einstein said, if there are perfect laws that talk about how electrons and protons and atoms work, And if there are perfect formulas for how the planets revolve around the sun, then can we find one law that brings them both together? And that's called the grand unified theory. That is a theory that, when mastered, allows the priest or the priestess or the practitioner to be able at will to call on the forces of nature. That's the seventh form of human being. Because by 525, some of our ancestors who were Homo sapiens had become what we call super sapiens. Let me give you an example. A couple of years back, there was a commercial on TV. Michael Jordan and Spike Lee. And he said, "Yo, Mike, how you do that, man?" And it shows Michael Jordan going up in the air, right? And just gliding up in the air, right? And Michael Jordan shrugs his shoulders like he don't know. Okay. Now, if Michael Jordan had been my student, he would have known. I would have said, "Mike, it's melanin." See, melanin is an earthly molecule, but there's also a cosmic body in the heavens. And when the human being allows him or herself to become one with nature, you see, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, brilliant brother out of the Center for Inner City Studies, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, call upon that ancestor's name, genius. He has a book that should be in all of our libraries. Or all of his books should be in our library, but I'm talking about intellectual warfare in particular, where he talks about the two different ways of looking at the world. And he says that African people see themselves as part of nature. They are part of nature. So in the interconnectedness of being part of nature, whatever you do to the slightest creation of the Creator is going to impact you. What you do to fish, what you do to the trees, what you do to the air, all will reflect back on you because you're all part of this one great ocean. The European and the Eurasian live a concept of alienation. They are alien from nature. So therefore, they don't see or perceive that what they do to another human being is going to bounce back on them. They don't see that when you pollute the water, it's going to come back on you. When you pollute the land, it's going to come back on you. When you pollute the air. Now, as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And the one thing that came out of the Avatar is that nature doesn't take sides, but it does what it has to do in nature's time. And African people understood this. And as they practiced their relationship with nature, they became one with nature, and therefore what they started to do was to take parts of nature and begin to say, wow, that hawk, that falcon, flies way up there. But there was something on the ground that wanted. And it was through precision, it was able to come down and snatch it and go right back up, didn't touch the ground, didn't touch us, grabbed it and going up. After a while I said, wow, that falcon has some serious eyesight.
Yeah.
And that's a gift given by the Creator to the falcon, eyesight. And so they said, wow, you know, I'd like that eyesight. I'd like to be able to see like that. So what they did metaphorically is they started to carve drawings with the head of a falcon on a human body. They didn't worship the bird. They worshiped the gift that the Creator had given, the specialty that the Creator had given to the falcon, to the bird. The image bird became Tahuti, or the patron of wisdom and knowledge, because that bird could see wisdom and knowledge. It could see truth and untruth. The owl Owl is not the most intelligent bird. However, the owl is used to be wise. Potato chips called wise, it's the owl. When you graduate, you got the owl. But the owl is not the most intelligent bird. However, there are two things that the owl can do very good. And one of them is to see in the dark, which metaphorically means that you can see truth in untruth. And it can turn its head 360 degrees, which means that it can see all angles of things. So the wiseness of the owl became such that, wow, I'd like to have that type of wiseness. And the dog. The dog has strong smell. It can tell when something can be eaten from the moment it can't be eaten. It's putrid. So our ancestors started to put the head of a dog on the body of a human. They didn't do that because they felt that they were worshiping the dog. They were worshiping the Creator-given gift that the Creator had given to them. So what began to happen is our ancestors began to say, nature has been given very special gifts by the Creator. And if we as humans, see, we have 3 gifts. We don't have a special. There's no reason why we're around. We're here by mistake. Because had the trees not dwindled, gorillas would be all around and we would be there. Okay? But it's because of a very interesting thing that happened during the Miocene period that made a drought on the earth that allowed the land-dwelling humans to be able to grow. But be that as it may, when our ancestors began to look at nature and began to see certain things, they said, wow, that's great. So what they started to search for was what would unify the outer world and the inner world. What allows the Kaba to say, as above, so below. As in the church, as it is on heaven, so shall it be on earth. That's where it came from. It's the unifying of the outer world and the inner world, and creating a formula that in studying nature and understanding nature, you then can become nature, and therefore, who is to say what nature can do? Who is to say the laws of nature? When you are nature, you make the laws. And as human beings, we have 3 gifts that separate us from everything else. We have intellect, we have reasoning, and we have language. Language that we can actually formulate. Intellect gives us the intelligence and the ability to have knowledge. The reasoning skills that take that knowledge and wisdom and are able to take us to higher levels. And the language that allows us to express the reasoning that we've done with our thinking. That's our gift. That's our specialty. And what we did with our specialty, which makes us the masterpiece of the universe, is that we then can look at nature and develop codes that allow us formulas that can call on these forces of nature at will. And that's what our ancestors were going after. And that is what the Grand Unified Theory is. The Grand Unified Theory is the study of the outer world, the special and general law of relativity, is the outer world of the planets, and then you have quantum physics of the inner world that talk about the atoms. And this formula that has been developed by a brother from Nigeria, Dr. Gabriel Igbo. I brought DVDs with me. I didn't bring that one with me. I'm not a good salesman. And the reason why is because I'm not going to ask you to pay for something that's on YouTube.
Right.
It's on YouTube. For those of you who have seen it, you just Google Dr. Gabriel Igbo, Kaba, Kamene, the Grand Unified Theory. Dr. Igbo and I have done a series of programs on the Philippe Matthews Show where we're literally taking and going through this formula. And I came upon Dr. Gabriel Igbo back in the 90s where a friend of mine had gone to a dinner party. And he came back and he said, yo, brother, I went to a party, man, this is brother that was telling me about, he's from the Ngala people of Nigeria, but he traces his ancestry back to Egypt. And I said, yo, what's that brother's name? He gave me his name, I called him up, we brought him in, he did 3 presentations about the connection. But somewhere in there he talked about this book, this astro-mathematical physics book that he called Turbulence. And in him talking about turbulence, I kept hearing Patah. Turbulence, Patah. turbulence. And I said, yo, brother, your book on turbulence, I heard you talk about it. I said, man, I really want to get that. It's in Nova Publishing, by the way. And he said, okay, give me a day. I'll call them and they'll give you a special discount price. I said, wow, that's fantastic, man. And so he called me, he said, look, man, they're ready for you. They're going to give you the discount price, the best price you can get. I said, that's fantastic, man. I think I want to order 2. Okay, I called him up, $175. But she was aboard of a budget, so I didn't care. I said, give me 2. So I bought 2 of these books, okay, on turbulence, right? Now I'll be honest with you, family, because I believe in being honest. I understand 3 pages. Out of about 160 pages, I understand 3. But those 3 pages I understand took me right back to the Shabbat and Patah. So I called a brother up. I said, yo, because I've been doing work on the Grand Unified Theory. Columbia was doing work on it. There's another brother named Michio Kaku who wrote String Theory. There are a lot of people working on the Grand Unified. Einstein died trying to figure this out. And so I called Dr. Ebo up and I said, man, look, wow, man, this is some heavy stuff. I said, man, I keep thinking about this Egyptian writing thing, man. I'm into the Grand Unified Theory. He said, you into the Grand Unified Theory? He said, that's my next book. So he wrote a book on the Grand Unified Theory. And so when you go to YouTube and you get to Google this, you'll see that this is a conversation that Dr. Ebo and I are having, when he's explaining the Grand Unified Theory. And I am placing all of the variables of his equation into the Shabbat stone. And I am showing where our ancestors had the formula for the Grand Unified Theory. Now, here is a article written on Dr. Gabriel Eagle. And here's the formula. That's the formula. That formula is the theory of everything. Let me say to you like this, and allow me the ability to come back at other times to be able to get deeper and deeper into this, because everything that the human being searches for, the number 1 question that is on the mind of human beings from the moment they're born is, who am I in this world? Where am I in this world? How in the world did I get here? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do it? And what happens after this life? Those are the questions. The Grand Unified Theory answers those questions. This is the structure of everything and all of the human family. Now, when you're looking at this, and you're getting into this, the basic structure of this story, remember 4. Okay? Remember the end to the end. Now, Dr. Yibo developed that formula before he understood the waters of good. But he has end to the end. Each one of these, which I do because we don't have time now, but it's on YouTube. Google it. And you'll see where he stands up for 20 minutes and he talks. Then I talk for 20 minutes. And what I'm attempting to do is to show how all of these variables are in fact the Shabbat. And that becomes very important to me. Because see, I want to look at this when I was young. I mean, I didn't understand the basic concept of what this is actually saying. This is our freedom. This frees us. Have no fear for a time. None of them can stop the time. You know, how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand beside them and say it's just a part of it, we better fulfill the book? We've been living in illusion where our ancestors had a codified way of freedom. Not just freedom from oppression, because, my brother, you and I were talking about life, okay? Family. When we get to where we need to be, when we get up out of this pit, and we get back up on the level ground, okay? We will have more challenges. this ain't the worst thing that's going to happen to us. This is only something that happened to us to get ready for the greater work that we have to do once we get up out of this pit. And that's what we have to train our babies for. That's what we have to gear our education about. You know what Dr. John Henry Clark told me about that? He said that although the pyramids are great structures, he said the one thing that was the greatest thing about the pyramids is that everybody in the society put their life and their career in the building of the pyramids. So if you were a baker, you baked for the people building the pyramids. If you made clothes, you made clothes for the people of the pyramid. If you made stone, you were the mason of the pyramid. If you were an engineer, if you were a math, everybody had a role in the building of the pyramid. And he said it is because of having a central focus on something to do that allowed the society to flourish. I am saying to us here to make Freedom Home Academy the pyramids of the 21st century. Everything that you do, focus on assisting the Freedom Home Academy to be the pyramids, to be that we all focus on, to build it, to grow it. Whatever it is that we do in life, whatever it may be, we all don't have to be teachers. Some of us may be bakers, some of us may be candlestick makers. It doesn't make a difference. But if we understand our history and what we have to do, the greatest societies are geared towards making it better for the children, hoisting them up on our shoulders in order for them to do better than us. It's our obligation to make them better than us. The Eurasian world is dealing with a concept that's called the Cronus complex. The Cronus complex is the idea that the adult says, I will do better than my father, and I will make sure my child cannot do better than me. It's a me focus, okay? I've renamed the Cronus complex. I call it the Trump complex. Where I'm going to, I am it, and everything else don't count. The only thing that counts don't count. But the idea is, this is what white supremacy is. It is about for the now. Everybody's doing for the now. I don't care if the water is poison for my children. I don't care if that pipeline running through Canada under the Missouri River bus, because I'm not going to run the bus, so yeah, I ain't going to be drinking water. Let my children deal with the problem, but I'm going to make my money right now. This is the mindset. Our mindset should be that our children do better than us. That's our job, to make sure they do better than us. And ever since we've been around, that's what we've been doing. Even to this very day, even in our struggle, we are still doing it. And it's something that we have to begin to look at. Now, what I want to do is I'd like to take a break, and I'd like to come back, and then I want to go through the Shabbat stone itself, so that you will be able to see exactly what the Shabbat stone is saying, and how it's developing itself. And then there's some other interesting things that I'd like to do as it relates to what we can do in the classroom. But my brother Marcus, I'd like to call you back up and give us a directive as to where we go from here in terms of, where we go from here.
Let's get it with a hand for a break. Break for about 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, vendors out. Still waiting on the rocket food, so I'm glad. Later. But we have the beginning out there, support those. We'll come back around 5. And we'll finish off at 6:15, 6:30. Thank you.
As it relates to the Shabbat stone. Before I do that, my brother Marcus, please, if you come for a moment. My sister Stephanie wanted to present something to you on behalf of the work that she does. And I also, after that's done, I want to tell you a little bit something about Sister Stephanie. You're a friend, because I see her commenting on this stuff. Every time you post one of those comments about those great students of yours, I see Sister like it. She always says something. But this is Sister Kashay. Sister and I work together, but I'll do more after she talks to Brother Marcus.
Greetings, family.
Greetings.
This is just such an honor to be in this place. I know the Lord one of the amazing things that you will continue to do. Already.
We are.
Great I'm an artist and a writer, and among other things, educator. I've been doing some amazing work with Kaba and allowed me to do some amazing work with him. After seeing probably an old presentation that he did in the 90s, he was on cable shows, and he was talking about melanin as a science and teaching our children. And it got my attention, right? Because such an amazing mind who could have been a professor at anyone's university at the time was taking his time to work with our little ones. I'm talking about primary, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So not only did this get my attention, but it impressed me. And it impressed me because I thought I knew a little something about melanin, but I really, really did not know. I had read the ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Cresswell's and 2 Billion with Brother Bernard King, but I still didn't know what I thought I knew. And so he enlightened me, and also enlightened me how we can share this with our children. So out of that bloomed a relationship with the brother. We've done a few things, but it also inspired me to create 2 books. Dark Wonder, which gives us the foundation of melanin information, and On Taste Can You See, which Brother Kaba titled, which goes into what melanin does for our senses. I don't consider these children's books, but family books, because in them not only is there a way to teach our children, but it's a way for the adults in the family to learn about these sciences and how we apply these sciences to our lives. So I wanted to present it to the school. I love what you family do. I'm right in the area. Volunteering.
I would like to come by and read.
Oh, I'm going to read the children. So absolutely.
Thank you, sis.
Family, just to continue with Sister Stephanie, our collaboration has been a number of pieces, and if you go on YouTube, you'll see some phenomenal visual work. But what's important about what I'm about to share with you is the fact that I decided that because of the love that I have of our people, particularly our children, our young people, I decided that I just wasn't going to talk about rap music in the sense that I was hearing it, because our children are doing the best they can with the very little we did for them. I'm taking responsibility myself. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody else. What I'm saying is that my generation is the beginning of hip-hop. Hip-hop came out of doo-wop. Doo-wop came out of bebop. I remember the sequences of the brothers that used to get in the playground with a little bit of Thunderbird singing up underneath the light on Saturday night, harmonizing, okay? That combined with the Black Panther Party, with SNCC and other organizations, there was a turn in terms of the consciousness being recited in music. And that was the birth of hip-hop in the 60s. And I watched as we as the elders allowed him to be co-opted by forces that meant us no good. And then I watched some of the young people who were striving to make it in the industry being bought out and co-opted by doing things and saying things that was inappropriate as it relates to the art of African peoples. So the consciousness that came from Gil Scott-Heron and from Nicky Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and the last poets began to get co-opted into what we now see happening. But I decided that I was going to approach it differently. I wasn't going to attack them for what they're saying. So what Sister Stephanie did and recommended, and I thought about, we collaborated where Sister took excerpts out of my presentations and back into the music. So that when I'm talking about the power of the word, as we'll talk about in the Shabbat song, the word, the creative word, when we're talking about what we can do with word and sound and music and vibration, what Sister and I collaborated on, Sister Kashe and I collaborated on, was 2 CDs. The first one was called From Chaos to Order, where it takes excerpts from various presentations. And she backs with some really nice music. But the second collaboration is Me More, which is taking excerpts out of my presentations on the Moors and backing it with very interesting music that is somewhere near the African sound and today's sound. But Sister went a step further and she developed a book that is a complement to the DVD. And I just wanted to say this because here in Chicago, I come to you as your brother from the Bronx. I come with a certain amount of information about it. But remember, with everything, and I may have missed it in the presentation yesterday, but the one thing I'm not hearing anybody talk about, which I mentioned, by the way, Hidden Colors 5, it's titled 1804, the Haitian Revolution. And one of the things, I don't know if it's going to be in it, but one of the things that I mentioned that we all have to understand is that Ed Chicago was founded by a Haitian brother by the name of Jean-Baptiste Pointe-Toussaint. This land was founded by African people. And so even that is overlooked as we talk about Chicago. And so to me it becomes important that you understand that I realize that here in Chicago, you have a long line. My brother Seba Murti, as I look at my brother Seba Murti, who's been doing work for a long time with Sister Dr. Peace, who some of you may have watched on her cable television show, who just shared his book with me, and he shared his other books with me. And Sister Kunza, his wife. The work that she's doing in the high schools. What's it? Say again?
Julian High School.
Julian High School.
He's one of my teachers right here.
Okay. See, what I'm trying to say to us is that, look, family, if we don't do something, if this just becomes a lecture, I didn't do my job. You have jewels in your community. And sometimes it takes someone from the outside to come in. But you've been doing the work for years. The elders that are here, you've been doing the work for years. I come in, but my job is to focus on them. Because tomorrow I'm catching the 3 o'clock back to New York. My question to you, Chicago, is what are you going to do 301? You know, what are you going to do from this point on? You know, what are we going to do? Is this just another lecture that you're going to wait for the next speaker to come in? Or are you going to decide once and for all that something's got to be done? Once and for all, you're going to understand that you have to take economics. And you've got to start using your money wisely. We all have to start using our money wisely. And I know we're all caught up on this. But I just want to focus in on some of the great people that you have here in Chicago that I know, and I'm sure that there are many others. Gary Holland, Brother Gary and I, Indianapolis. He used to come to my presentations in Chicago when I used to do some work back in the 200s, when former President Barack Obama was your state senator. Before he was even your senator, I was coming here to Chicago. Gary, good brother, Reggie came in, used to check out my presentations. He invited me to Indianapolis. He called me one day, he said, "Brother, I'm thinking about doing a curriculum, okay, historic journey." And he said, "I'm gonna send you the 10-minute DVD. And out of this has come a phenomenal curriculum." Gary, do you have the curriculum with you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, man, show it. I'm taking this back with me, so please. But this is the curriculum called the Historic Journey. Fundamentally, what I worked on this, developed all of the core curriculum, all of the core standards that our children should be learning in the classroom are in this book, but from an African-centered perspective. The core of it was the celebration of President Barack Obama rising to the President of the United States. However, the theme song to it is Marvin Sapp's "Never Could Have Made It." And out of the concept of "never could have made it" are all of the people that made it possible for President Obama to become president. So that while you focus on President Obama, what you're really focusing on are all the shoulders that he sat on to become President of the United States. So therefore, you're enrolled in the entire history. And guess what? We go back to ancient Kemet, because my contribution to the book was ancient Africa and its contributions. And then it goes into
post 1492. So you have curriculum here, and I made it a point of introducing Brother Gary to Brother Marcus. So many of the lessons that Brother Marcus implements in the Freedom Home Academy comes directly out of that curriculum. So it becomes important, Chicago, that you understand that you've got something. You can do this. And I'm serious. And everybody's looking for that savior to come. But I once spent time in Atlanta, and we did Gathering of the Masses. Our brother Dr. Delvin Blair was there, and Bobby Hemmett, and Julie Pookrum, and Phil Valentine. I could go to Neely Fuller. I could go through the list of all the people that were there to present. But the Gathering of the Masters were not the people that came to speak to the people. The Masters were the people that came to hear the message. So I look at you as the Masters. Because if it wasn't for you, I'd be talking to the air. I am because you are. I function because you are. I do what I do because of you. And it's important that those of us who come before you assist us in understanding this so that you're not going to wait for the next speaker to come in. That you're going to realize that right now, right here, when you leave this room, you can make a decision that you're going to make a change. And that you're not going to depend on anyone but yourself to do what needs to be done. Because I'm not doing my job. You know, this is just because a lecture, come on, some of you have been out-lectured. You workshop out. Come on, we know that. And it's nice to come in here and talk and this, but we got to do something, family. We got to do something, and we got to do it for our babies. We got to do it for our children, and we have to do it for those yet unborn. And I'm serious, and I just want you to do something. I want us to do something. And the one thing that you can do is you don't have to worry about no beds in the mosque. You don't have to worry about nobody in the White House. You don't have to worry about any of those, because I asked you, do you think Harriet Tubman ever was concerned about who was the president of the United States when she was on the Underground Railroad? Do you ever think she thought somebody will help me in the White House? That sister was doing her thing no matter what. And like I said earlier in the conversation, that if you may not have been here, whether Hillary Clinton won the election, whether Donald Trump won the election, or even if they dared to give Barack Obama a third term, I'd still be here today talking to you this way. Nothing's getting in my way. And that's how we should feel. I ain't worried. There is not a bone in my body concerned about Donald Trump. I'm more concerned about what we do than what he does. Makes sense to you, family? Because if we don't start thinking like, if we don't change the paradigm, if we don't change the way our neurons are connected, then this becomes another lecture. You are sitting in the better Ankh, the house of life. You are sitting here. You are sitting in our solution. And if you support this brother and the staff and what they're doing, if you support Sister Kunza and Brother Semamerti and the dear brothers and their guests behind you, they wrote me in Chicago one time. This brother Dear heard a presentation and he was so motivated. He said, look, I just want to do something for the community. I just want to do something. What will it take? And I remember talking to him. I was in City Island. I can tell you exactly where I was because the quality of his voice and the intentions of his passion was so powerful. I can remember where things happened sometimes. That's the melanin in my head. This brother brought me to Chicago, spoke to a church. Brother Marcus came. Some other people came. Here's my family here. Please stand. That's what I'm seeing. This family brought me to church. So when you started seeing people coming in and I was talking to them, this is all family here. These are folk that brought me in to speak at ITT on melanin and on the Moors. Because the message was so powerful, they wanted to spread the word. So if you're looking for the Savior, I'm going to tell you where to go. You're looking for the Savior. Every time I'm looking for my Savior, I carry this around just to remind me. Okay? You want your Savior? Start there, and we'll never worry about who's outside. Our mantra should be, if it is to be, it's up to me. And if what I've just said in opening up this part of our presentation somehow alters what we do, then what I came to do has nothing to do with the Shabbat Stone, because what we did was the Shabbat Stone, which was to come into existence, was to call forward a new day, a new way, and no more games. We're going to start doing something. You can start off with my little, and I'm going to show you a couple of other things. And I am sure there are other people in this room that I may not identify, and I do apologize if I don't, but I know you're doing great things in the community. There are people who could not come to this presentation who are doing great things in the community. But I'm saying that Chicago has it within yourself. How about the sister with the black ball? Can I give you some hand clapping? You talk about economics, this is the black ball. You go online. Ujama Market, right here. This sister right here. It's right here. You're looking for your savior. This is it. You are your own savior. You gotta make this happen. And I'm going to end with this. This part. I'm so happy. Guess what? Good morning, America. Okay. Wake up, everybody. Hey, how Melvin had it. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. Time for forward thinking. Okay? This is a wonderful time. Wake up. We needed this. Okay, sometimes you try to wake somebody up and you're being nice about it. Okay? Okay? Bring that bullhorn in there. Okay? They will wake up. We're woke. We're here. Okay? And this is a wonderful time to be African. Have no fear for atomic energy. None of them can stop the time. This is just a time. This is our time. This is an anointed time. This is an appointed time. We as an African people have been bred for this moment. If anyone that can teach them how to live without medical care, without affordable care, is us. We've been here 400 years and didn't have no insurance. Not only that, but we were their experiments that allowed them to learn how to cure. You see, family? Yes. See, we're a powerful people. But because we've been locked into this concept of who we are being defined by other people, we buy into it. Power is the ability to define someone's reality and have that person accept that definition as if it were their own. We are such a great people. We have been shaped for this moment in time. Nobody can get them. I've grown up with brothers and sisters of the Spanish-speaking community. Beloved to them. I learned about Africa through my family, my neighbors that practice Santeria. I learned about spirituality, about Africa through my neighbors from Puerto Rico. That's where I learned Africa. I learned African American history from my family, but I learned about Africa through my neighbors who practice Santeria, Las Cientas Potencias, the 7 powers, Jemajal, Obatala, you know. Oh shoot, I was looking at these African deities, I was saying, well, I didn't see this in the church. And so that's why I was introduced to it. But there was also a segment of our community of Spanish speakers who 50 years ago, when they said, march with us, they said, oh, no, that's not our problem. So we said, well, to our brothers and sisters from the Afrab community, we said, yo, remember the Crusades? March with us. Let's move in. No, that's not my problem. Okay. Here we are. say it, but don't say it. Well, we have some Negroes in town. They're building walls to keep them Negroes there. Spanish-speaking Negroes and San Negroes. Okay? You are our brothers and sisters, and we beseech you to come help us. You didn't. So now look. Now look at what they're doing. And who to explain to them that they have to do better than us? We've been doing this for 400 years in this country. Now this is time that they will join us. It's time for us to lay the ground rules down. Let us be very clear. We know what has to be done. And if you want to join us, it's going to be done our way. In a way that we know how to do this. This is very clear. And I've expressed this to my community of Spanish-speaking peoples and to my Muslim brothers and sisters. Okay, you came to Detroit, right? You took over Detroit, right? You built all those bodegas, right? Now look, you can't even get into town safely. And don't leave, because you can't come back. Is this real family? Is this what we're actually looking at? Because now it's time for us to understand that we are the people that have answers to all of the problems that are out here. Okay? Last time I remember it was a 1 million man march. Last time I remember it was a 1 million youth march. Now they done, and it was a 1 million women's march. Sisters. Now what we got? We got another women's march. Okay? But had you understood the power that we brought, you would have sided with us, and we all would have walked through the gates together. But you walked through the gates thinking that the gates were open for you, and they were just open for you so they could close them behind you and lock you back into prison, where they had you in the ice 2000 BC. I'm just trying to drop it like it's hot, family. Because I don't have time to see when I'm at the age where I am right now. The one thing Joy DeCree said, when you get to this age and when you're very young, you just don't care what people think about you. You see, when you're a certain age, you don't offend this one, you don't want to offend this one. See, I'm at the point now where I look at people and I'll tell them, you know what your problem is? You're stupid. Because I don't care. That's where I am now. We're a great people, family. What we have gone through and what we've allowed to happen has happened for divine reasons. Not for haphazard reasons, for real reasons. And that is so we could get to this day because we knew somehow or other that this day was coming and that our counsel would be needed by the world to understand how do you get them out. 2017, I got nothing but respect and love for you because this system wasn't meant for you to be around. And the fact that you're still here means that somehow or other you've had the resilience to be able to step forward to that new day and not let things get you down. I may not agree with your lifestyle, I may not agree with what you're doing, but I still do love and respect you unconditionally, and we've got to work this out together. Those are our children too. The most perfect gang. And I've been with gangs, not in gangs, but with gangs, and I call them street organizations. They are the most perfect. They are the most perfect families. We as brothers, what are we doing in our families? Are we that male representative in that family that lets that young brother know I love you, respect you? If we're not there, then that lead gang member, you tell them, I love you. You hungry? I'll take you to Popeyes. I'll get you a chicken dinner. You want these sneakers? I'll buy you a pair of sneakers. I got your back. Whatever you need, I got you. Nobody gonna mess with you as long. That's what a father tells a son. As we are fathers, you see, I'm not into nation building. I'm into empire building. Nations are built by people. Empires are built by families. Empires ain't built on baby daddies. And our sisters need that balance in that family to bring that brother through. Okay, my wife is a phenomenal woman, a phenomenal mother. But she don't know how to raise our son to be a man. No more than I know how to raise my daughters to be women. I don't know what that is. Okay, but I know what it is to be a young boy, a young man. So I put brother in check. I said, yo, take it back. Carry your mother bags, okay? Or we'll do what men do with our young sons. That's why the dynasties were families. We're still talking about Egypt because they were empires, not nations. We have to make differences in our families. We have to be there for our children. We have to help them in all of this. And we have to be there for our sisters. You know, the Set Beti is known as the one who has the right. And just imagine when we called our sisters were known as Emet Neset Waret. Emet Neset Waret. Emet Neset Waret, we break down the metaphor, it means the deep well of water that I return to when I'm parched by the desert. That's what our sisters were. Now think about this. See, now, for those of us who have never been in the desert before, you don't know what it is to be parched. You can be thirsty. We're talking parched. Parched, you blow the dust out your mouth. Parched. And when you parched by the desert, there's only one thing on your mind. There's only one thing that will satisfy. There's only one thing that will bring you completion. What is that? Water. But not only were our sisters water, but they were water. Not only were they a well of water, they were a deep well of water that we went to as men when we were parched by the desert. That's a phenomenal analogy to have for a sister. Long before we call them what we call them today, they were Hemet Neset Waret to us as brothers. And we were the ones that ruled. But we sat on the throne, and the throne was a feminine principle, and it was the woman who gave the man the right to rule. King don't make queen, it's the queen that makes the king. And it was a balance, it wasn't one was better than the other. Who better to choose the king than the hand that rocked the cradle? It makes sense, it makes a sociological, psychological sense why women would play a central figure in the development of the community. It makes a lot of sense. It's not about better or worse, superior or inferior. It's about balance. It's about ma'at. And once we get back to this and stop thinking like they think as it relates to women, once we stop thinking like them and we shift our paradigm of thought, we will understand that our women should not be on a pedestal, they should not be in front of us, they should not be behind us. They should simply be beside us. And together we walk through this and do what we need to do. Little by little, step by step. But we also have to understand where we come from. We come from a civilization where it was never meant for a man to be in control. Because if the brother was in control on the plantation, the power would come from the European plantation on that. And once there was, and again, the feeling of love, we were afraid to show love for each other. Because if we showed love for a sister, they would sell us. So we had to show a coldness, although it might have been a whole bunch of heat behind closed doors. It was a coldness that we've learned to have towards each other in order to survive, in order to continue to love our partner, in order to continue to love our children. If a mother so loved her child that she would defend the child against anything that the plantation owner, she would be sold, or the child would be sold. So a lot of what we're looking at, while we have to shift the paradigm, we also have to forgive ourselves in order to move forward. And I don't mean to forgive ourselves where we let people do to us what they do. If we forgive ourselves so that we can live a more balanced life in our day. And it runs right up into Jim Crow when they were making sure that the brother, you got a public assistance according to if you were alone. So every time that they were coming to search our families, Dad had to leave. Knowing that if Dad was there, the family would get less money and they wouldn't be able to survive. I grew up in a family in a project where my mother wasn't allowed to work. My mother used to walk me to school in the morning as a first and second grade, knowing that I couldn't go home. And she would walk me to school in her house clothes. And then she'd go down the road where she worked, and she would go into the back door, into the bathroom. She would change into her work clothes, put her makeup on, and go to work. At the end of the day, she would come back down in the back, go into the bathroom, take the makeup off, put her house clothes back on. I would meet her on the corner of 59th Street and 9th Avenue, and we'd walk home together. I did that as a child, because if they found out my mother worked, they would kick us out of the projects. And if they did that, my father worked for the post office. We didn't make the kind of money that would allow us to get into an apartment. The projects was the best we could do. So they locked us into this poverty and this pain. But some of us learn how to get out. That's what we have to do. We have to apply that same psychology that allowed my mother to do that for years in order for us to be able to get some semblance of economy, to be able to move out of the situation. So we could, and now I come back to the projects to teach class. I didn't do it to escape them. I did it to come back for a better day. And we have to start really thinking about this, family. We have to look inside of Chicago. Folk coming from outside may be able to give you ideas, but it's people in Chicago that's going to change things. The Chicago story that I'd like to share with you. This is a presentation that I did that I'm comparing the Dogon of Mali. What our ancestors did, according to Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, in his book, Civilization of Barbarism, chapter 17, he says that what catapulted the human thought, the human family, into a whole other way of thinking was the fact that our ancestors dared to think of what existed before existence existed. They dared to go back to the beginning before the beginning began. That is a psychological, radical thought. It may seem for us where we are today to be fundamental, but the idea is our ancestors wanted to figure out what existed before. Now, what I'm about to introduce to you right now is the Grand Unified Theory. Because my research says that in the beginning, there was only one thing that existed in the universe, and the universe was made up. When we talk about God is omnipotent, omniscient, and forever present. In other words, the Creator is all present, all knowing, and is everywhere. Okay? All the time. The idea is that you've got to identify something that has always been around, is around, and will always be around. To do that, you have to go back before the beginning began to figure out what was there. And what our ancestors said, they said it was the waters of Nun. The waters of Nun. Shabakaso. The waters of Nun. Nun represents matter as water. This theory goes on and says, in the waters, there is an essence. In the waters of Nun, everything is in its potential state. Here's where science comes in. Everything is in potentiality. Everything is potential energy. Energy at rest. They said at some point in time, there was an event. In today's science, we call it the Big Bang. To our ancestors, they called it Ptah. Ptah. Ptah in science represents the conversion of energy at rest into energy in motion. It's conversion. It's an action-oriented event that goes inside of the nun and it does something. In other words, that's what I mean by turbulence. There is turbulence in the waters. Something occurs. The story goes on to say that rising up out of the waters of Nun, through the energy of Ptah, rises Atum, or the creative word. Now I can take you into scripture and I can show you where you have Adam identifying all of God's creations. And that's exactly what's happening in this story as it relates to Atum, which means creative word. What's going to happen is that Atum is going to begin to name things. Atum is going to name things, and Atum is going to name 4 pairs. You're going to have Nun, Nunet, Ha, Ha-he, and whenever you add a T, that's a feminine principle. From the very beginning, our ancestors understood you can't have a male god. That just don't work. I still can't wrap my head around that. It just doesn't make, for every god you have to have a goddess. And by that, I'm not talking about the anthropomorphic gods that they talk about. I'm talking about essences of things, natures, okay? Nun represented matter or water. Nunet represented space or air. Atum calls in infinity, that which has no end. And infinity calls in Kab and Kaket. Kab represents the darkness, and Kaket represents the light. Now keep in mind Dr. Yibo's grand unified theory, because that's what we're talking about. But now what I'm doing is I'm taking those principles, those formulas. Remember I told you, remember there are 4 things that Dr. Yibo's talking about. What I'm actually doing now is I'm demonstrating. You have Amen and Amenet. You have the hidden and you have the revealed. This is the story that is in illustrated form that I developed. These are the different natures or the definitions of the characteristics of this story. This is the Nun. Now, what becomes important about the Nun in science now? To the science teachers, the people interested in science, the Nun is represented as wavy waters. Today we look upon, we say that the universe is made up of waves and particles. Some people call them wavicles. Theories of the string theory come directly out of this concept. You can see the string theory in this. Again, you can study the work of Michio Kaku, a Japanese brother that talks about these issues. This is very important to understand about science. Because our ancestors were talking science. In this story I just gave you, our ancestors were talking science, but they did it in metaphor. Dr. Asa Hilliard once told me that the way in which Africans communicate with each other, the figurative language is ubiquitous to the African thought. I have to look that word up, ubiquitous. And ubiquitous means all up in there. It's like saying, what part of butter isn't milk? It's all up in there. Rap music, it's all metaphor, simile, personification, you know, foreshadow, flashback. That's how we talk. Yo, that's bad. Okay? That's figurative language. Europeans say, no, I thought that was good. But see the way we do it, something, you know, it's bad, right? And then like we say, oh, that's good. Okay, that's good. Now I say, that's bad. Right? Okay? Now if I say you, that's bad, my body is telling you another level of how good it is. You see, ubiquitous. It's all up in there. Everything we do, we got flavor, right? Usain Bolt breaks records. What does he do? Wow! Everybody says, you can't do it. That's bragging. That's not bragging. The brother got flavor. Okay, he's not saying he's better than you. He's saying he's better than he was yesterday. But they don't get that because they are living in a constant competition, a constant fight, a constant insecurity, an inferiority complex. So therefore, when you feel good about yourself, you must be telling them they're not feeling good about themselves. They tell you you can't love Africa because that means that you hate me. No, you built your love on you because you attempted to be fearful of me. I can love me and love you too. You keep acting like that, I won't. But I can't love you. Make sense? This is the flavor. This is how we talk. This is how we are. This is why our children, you know, when I was in the classroom, I had a student that used to be in class, and he was like this the whole time, taking notes, you know, writing down on the thing. He was taking notes the whole time, right? Other teachers told him to sit down. Okay? I wouldn't do it. Okay? I let him do it. I told him, look, the principal come in and sit down. But I said, go ahead, because this brother's melanin was on such a level. He always did good on the tests. He always had answers, but he just couldn't sit. He couldn't sit down. You know, and it was torture for him to sit down. Of course, principal come in, come on, you gotta sit down. But this is us, this is our flavor, this is who we are, this is the way we tell our stories. And so when we're dealing with those waters, if you go down and you look at the serpent, you'll now see that the serpent looks very much like those wavy waters. When you go down and look at the serpent, you then go down and you look at spermatozoa. You then go down and look at spermatozoa, you now look at the tadpole. You come down from the tadpole, you see that that's an electrical current. And what are waves in space but electrical currents? You see disruption, turbulence. A straight line is coming, turbulence, okay, makes it wavy. This is what happens, and our ancestors knew what was going on. Phenomenal. Carved on the walls of ancient Kamene. You have those waves drawn, carved on the walls, and as you walk through the temple, these waves move according to the way the sun is moving across the heavens. Our ancestors knew how to make rocks move. And here's the depiction of them as waves, black waves. Now, those 8 essences remain in the waters of Nun as frogs and snakes. Now, why would frogs and snakes be important as animals representing what is called the Neteru Nu? Neteru. See, in English we say netures. S is the plural. But in Medu Neta, when you add a U, that's what pluralizes the word. So Neteru are multiple neta. I'm going to move through. This is exactly what's going on. Okay, now there's the frogs and snakes that are carved on the walls. This is what the Neteru look like. Nun, Nunet, Ha-Ha-Het, Ka-Ka-Het, Amen, Amenet. The 8 infinitive ones, the uncreated creations. How do you think our ancestors depicted uncreated creations? These are the only 8 depictions are uncreated. How do you think our ancestors in their thought process developed an idea where when you look at them, they were uncreated? I'll tell you. They didn't have belly buttons. These are the only 8 essences that don't have belly buttons. One of the things you see of all the netters, Neteru, is that they all have belly buttons. These are the only that don't. Why? Because they were never created. They were always in existence. But look at what they're saying. This is what has always been, always existed. In the waters of the moon, in potentiality. But once Ptah comes and Atum comes, Atum calls. So what is this? The unity of the 3 brings forward and names that which was always there. And what was always in the universe? There was always water. See, remember I told you this was Nun, but I only told you this was Nun because I called it Nun. Nun don't have a name until Atum gives it a name. Water or matter was always around, space was always around, concept of infinity was always around, the idea of that which has its boundaries was there, the darkness was always there, the light was always there, what was hidden was always there, and what was revealed was always there. It always existed. But it took Atum to name it, to bring it into existence. That's why naming ceremonies in Africa are so important. Because the child isn't existing until Kunti Kinte raises Kizzy and says, behold the only thing greater than yourself. The naming ceremony is very important. And so, because when you call somebody, that is why stereotypical books, like the 5 Chinese brothers, I banned that book. Because none of the brothers have names and they all look alike. So, when you don't have a name, you don't have an existence. And if you look at a lot of the old-time movies, they don't give black people names. Like in the Mummy with Boris Karloff, the brother that's in the movie, he's called the Nubian. But he don't have a name. All the more, Morgan Freeman just recently, all the more. Or you have the butler. Or the help. You see, great movie, but hey. So, say it.
And I was just saying,
Yes, yes. And the latest one coming out now with Tom Cruise, guess what her name is? Amunet. Okay, check it out. See, now that they know we know it's us, now they're desecrated. But Dr. Clark would say, I'm surprised. If they don't treat you right, what makes you think they're going to teach you right? The unity of 3, Nun, Ptah, Atum, the God in 3. That is the original Trinity. One Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It was Nun, Ptah, Atum, the first Trinity, the first unity of 3. Each of them is the same essence. But this is from whence all thing comes, this is the energy of what comes, and this is the mouth of what comes. You need these 3 in order to bring forward these 8 essences as frogs and snakes. But let's keep going. Why snakes? Because snakes molt. They shed their skin. And when they shed their skin, they go to a desolate area and they go into a comatose state. And they literally build a new skin inside the dead skin that's dying. When it's time for that state to come forward, it slithers across the ground, it opens up, and it leaves the old skin behind as it comes forward with the new skin. It represented resurrection. The snake was left in the waters of Nun because it represented resurrection. And here's just a story about it. Here's what the old skin looks like. This is a story of the 8 Neteru. And here's the frog. This is why the frog was used. Again, I'm going back to this story. But now let's get deep. Look at what the spermatozoa looks like. And look at what the tadpole looks like. Look at the beginning of human life. Have you ever wondered why you dissect a frog in biology? Why a frog? All the things, why a frog? Because I'm sure you know. Here's what it looks like as it goes through its metamorphosis. On the left side, you have the human. On the right side, you have the frog. Okay. On the left-hand side, this is the tadpole's life. This is what a tadpole looks like, midpoint of its life. What you have on the right-hand side is the 5th week of life of the embryo. And the reason why you dissect a frog is because we have similar central nervous systems. Look at that. That's the embryo when you pull it out. And that's the tadpole. Now, family, our ancestors have to have been doing some experiments to come to these conclusions and to know this. You see, this is the backstory to this. You had to have done research to be able to do this, to say why frogs and snakes. They just didn't pull out frogs and snakes. They had done the study, they had done the research necessary to know this great knowledge and wisdom. This is who our ancestors were. And so it becomes important as we look at this and we understand this, we now have to understand that if you want to study us as a people, you have to understand the cosmic calendar. You can't understand it. I always introduce the cosmic calendar to the community. And basically, if you looked at the beginning of the cosmos, you would understand that you break it up into 1 billion years per month. So the cosmic calendar basically, this I get from Carl Sagan in his series called Cosmos. Just recently, the brother, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, redid the cosmos, and it's pretty close to this. He gives it 16 billion years, but a billion year being who cares? The development of the superclusters, from that moment, that Big Bang, the superclusters come into existence, superclusters explode and give off clusters, clusters explode, give off galaxies, galaxies explode, give off stars, stars explode, give off planets. That's the same story that's being told in the Shabbat story. And if time permitted, we could really get into this, but I want to cover so much with you, I want to make sure. So now when you get to the month of December, the real point that I'm trying to make here with you is that when you get into the month of December, things start happening in a very quick way. And so on what would be, let me take you back to the other. When you study life on Earth, and you don't go into the cosmos, well, the Earth doesn't come into existence until what would be September 14th. So what you're talking about is 8.5 billion years before the Earth even exists. Now, if it is true that we have always been, will always be, then we as an entity were always there. We were in this time, but we just weren't in this form. But we were, because energy cannot be created or destroyed. So we were around, but just not like this. And that's what our ancestors taught. So that the Earth comes into existence on September 14th, according to this calendar. The stuff of life isn't going to occur until October. The idea of organic copulation, or the male and female principle coming together to bring forward child, isn't going to come into November. And December, we just have to go on to a whole other map. And so now we have the month of December, where you now have green light photosynthesis, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen chain. Now, what's important about this? What's important about this is that there was an age on the Earth, as we studied the geological ages and stages, that the Earth was covered by a carboniferous covering that did not allow sunlight to come down. And so therefore, there was a suffocation, so to speak. But by December, what happened, as it relates to the story, the next story here says that Atum gives birth to another set, Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut give birth to Nut and Geb. Another story, Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture. Shu and Tefnut give birth to Nut and Geb, sky and earth. And Nut and Geb give birth to Aset, Asar, Nebatet, Seton, and Asar and Aset give birth to Heru. But the story that I want to get to here is that this Carboniferous age that covered the earth didn't allow light and heat energy to come down to the earth. However, in this story, Nut and Geb are in a lover's embrace. They're copulating. Shu comes down and separates Nut from Geb. In science, that was the air coming down and creating space between the sky and the earth. This is our science. And it was when Shu as air came and separated the sky from the earth that sunlight was allowed to come down. And that's where you see Nut extended over. You see her swallowing the sun at night and giving birth to it in the day. This is the story of light and heat energy coming down to the earth and creating. First, you see these entities, Asar as green. When you see Asar as green, that's a discussion on botanical life. Then you see Asar black, that is like animal life, human life. So you have two different stories of Asar. You have Asar, and you know because he's green and he has little plants coming up out of his body. This is how deep our ancestors are. This is the science that they taught. Isn't this exciting? I'm excited. I'm telling you, I can't get over this, you know? Because this is a genius. This is genius thought. This can liberate us. And to me, this is what becomes so important in terms of understanding. Our ancestors were some deep thinkers, deep African thought. You know, we have been trivialized by this superficial way of thinking that this world has brought forward. They should be ashamed of themselves. They're ignorant. And they don't appreciate the stuff. But that's just more. You have the age of the fishes, which is going to give birth to the vertebrae. The age of the fishes now, we talked about the reptiles earlier. We were talking about the reptiles. The winged insects and the amphibian lung fish are going to come into existence because there's going to be fish that the water is going to come up and it's going to push them up on land. And they're not going to be able to get back to the water. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to use their fins in order to traverse to get to the next water pond. Okay? For some of them, by the time they get to the next water pond, what were gills are going to become lungs, and what were fins are going to become feet. So they're going to stay up on the land, and those are going to be the amphibians. The amphibians are going to give birth to the reptiles. The reptiles are going to give birth to what we call the dinosaurs. I'm wrestling with that concept. Dinosaurs are going to live for 160 million years, but on the 26th, the first day of Kwanzaa, the age of the mammals. Now, the human family isn't going to come into existence until the 30th of December. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is if you want to study us, you just can't study life along the Hapi. You can't study humans. You got to go back to the beginning before the beginning began and trace the lineage of us to understand. And what our ancestors did is in tracing this lineage in the Shabbat stone, they were able to go back to the very beginning and the moment before the beginning began. And when they did that, they were able to return back to the waters of Nun. And then they were able to join nature. And now what Dr. Gabriel Eagle has done is he has given us a formula that takes us back. And that anything we wish upon, they tell us wish upon a star, there's a reason why they wish upon a star. Because when you wish upon a star, you're going home. Because you are a star. we are not earthly, we're stars. We're bits and pieces of star cells encased in this tomb that we call alive. And upon what we see, death don't exist. To our ancestors, death don't exist. Death exists to them because they are going to die. Because there was a time they were not here. There was a time the Eurasians were not on the planet. In fact, they've only been on the planet no more than 6,000 years. For millions of years, the only walking humans on the earth were African peoples. Well-melanated, curly hair, wide nose, thick lipped, only human beings. When we went up into the Ice Age, or when we went up into the 51st parallel, we were caught in the Ice Age, the warm Ice Age, and over a couple thousand years of ice, we then morphed into the Eurasian with like a pigment. And again, this is all science. You have epidermis and dermis. In your epidermis, you have 5 layers. Stratum corneum, stratum luciderm, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basale. In the bottom 2 layers, in your spinosa and basale, you have a biochemical known as 7-dehydrocholesterol. Hydrocholesterol. You go, see, what they tell you is you need vitamin D. But what they do not tell you is that there are 4 types of vitamin D. Okay? There's D1 and D2, inactive. And when the sunlight comes down and touches your epidermis, the 7-dehydrocholesterol is impacted in the bottom 2 layers. When the 7-dehydrocholesterol and the sunlight interact, that's what converts inactive D1, D2 into active D3, D4. D3 is what you're after. Ain't not like the real thing. This ain't sunlight. But I do take me 1,000 of vitamin D to make up for what this cold is doing to me, particularly up in New York. But if you look at this, when you go to get vitamin D, it'll always say D3. Because that's the vitamin D that you want. And when that happens, that's what starts the process of everything, the absorption of calcium and all the other things happens when sunlight touches your epidermis and it's pulled in, combines with 7-dehydrocholesterol, and that's what starts the process of converting the inactive 1,2 into active D3, D4. In the ice, there is no sun. In fact, there are generations that live without ever seeing the sun. They live in cloud cover all of their life. Which means that that sunlight wasn't getting on their skin. So to make up for the lack of sunlight, in order to be able to absorb the little bit that they could, this dark skin, well, we're doing it now. This ain't the color I was in July. Me darker in July. Okay, I turned this way over the months. So did you. Don't make a difference. How well melanated you are, when you get to a certain point, when you are in the absence of the sun, you are going to lose this tan. Not just that, let's do the reverse. Let's look at summertime. And when you hear European women talk about, we know, we say kinky. Okay, their word for kinky, frizzy. In summertime, their hair go home too. It's called frizzy. They frizz-ease. They have all sorts of things to control their kinks. But they got kinky hair too. And how does hair form itself? Hair forms itself in your hair follicle, you have a sebum, which is an oily, waxy substance that's in your sebaceous gland. See, this is why we have to get scientific. This is why we have to study. This is why we have to give this to our children. So when they're talking about bad hair and good hair, you break this lesson on them, they'll understand that in the heat of the equator, the sebum packets burst and send the waxy substance up to the surface of the skin. When it's here, you have a lot of hair follicles in your hair, but you have it all over your body. That's why sometimes you touch yourself, you're very waxy or oily. Well, that's sebum. And what happened in the hair is that when the sunlight comes down and it impacts the sebum protects the scalp, but in protecting the scalp and cooking, what happens is that it makes the hair follicle elliptical. And that's what creates the kink. As we moved from the hot climate to the colder climate, the oil of the sebum was allowed to remain on the hair. It attached itself to the follicle and it made it straight. That's what straight hair is. In fact, when it gets real straight, what do we call it? Dead straight. So when we're looking at the human family and what we've gone through and what we've experienced, what we're looking at is the 30th of December is when the human ancestors begin to appear as we know them. The point I want to get out of this is that on the 31st, the pyramid builders, the ones that made jewelry, the one that buried the dead, the one that did everything that they did not appear on the planet until the last 10 seconds of the last minute of the last hour of the last day. So even when we're talking about the old dynasty, you know when the ball, well for me in New York in Times Square is coming down, that 10 seconds is when the creative thinkers were on the planet. So you see, family, when we look to who we are, now you see why our ancestors were wrapped up in cosmology. Because it was cosmology and astronomy that made things happen. And it was when they looked up into the heavens, they understood the earth. When they looked at the earth, they better understood the heavens. When they understood both, they understood themselves because they were the medium between the heavens and the earth. Spirituality came out of agriculture. A seed that then would grow, would die, decay, and resurrect itself. That's where the idea of resurrection came from agricultural science. So, family, here's your homework assignment. I'm the teacher. What is it that you can practice that is the basic understanding of what we just went through? See, it's one thing to talk about this, but now I'm going to ask you to become it. I'm going to ask you to become the Grand Unified Theory. And I've developed an activity where you can fulfill the Grand Unified Theorem how to master accomplishing your goals as a that would call things into being and regulate the world. And that's us. So that as you look at the earth and you look at the heavens, you come to understand how the story unfolded itself. So, what I'm recommending, and then of course the final step is after you've accomplished your goal, pick another goal. And pretty soon you can then graduate, and pretty soon you are doing things that you thought that you would never be able to do. And that's what the universe did. That's how the cosmos came into existence. And this is the story that the Shabbat stone tells us. This is what Dr. Gabriel Eagle has codified in his G-I-J, comma J equals 0. Because this is his conversion of that formula that I showed you before. This is a conversion of it. This is what it looks like now. That is it. G-I-J, comma J equals 0. The G. See how young people say, yo, G. Okay, not by chance. You see masonry? Okay, come on. Here's the G-I-J, comma J equals 0. The G equals the nun, the creator and the collective unconscious ancestral line who reside in the cosmic temple of eternal life. You see, we don't believe in death. We believe in eternal life. It's like we are in a temple. And in this temple we come upon a door. That doorway is conception. We live in that room for 10 months. We come to the next door, that's birth. We live in that room, we come to the next door, that's what they call death. But it's only another doorway into another room in the eternal temple of life. There is no death. It doesn't exist. It exists for a people who were not here in the beginning. Because there will come a time on in 1,000 years, people we know as Eurasians will not exist. And if they were smart, they better go to this workshop that Robert De Niro does, because I call it the De Niro effect. Because that brother, no, he only mates with a black woman. He loves himself black woman. No, he does. Because he knows, for his seed to exist in the future, he has to be with a black woman. In fact, when Europeans came up out those mountains, the first thing they should have done was to find the biggest, blackest place they could. To begin to go back into the archetype of humanity. Instead, they had this xenophobic fear of the foreign, forbid themselves from mating with the archetype, would only mate with themselves. And what we're dealing with today is not a mutation. The Eurasian is a mutation of a mutation. Because they were a mutation when they came out the ice. When they started mating with each other, mutants were mating with mutants. And now that they be having this optimum, I don't know what they are now. They don't work themselves off the human chain. They humankind. The eye, the first eye represents the Ka, involving to the God within. See, we evolved. We evolved and our hands got the right size, our heart got the right size, our heads got the right size, all of our organs got to the right size. But then when we got to this right here, and we stopped growing this way, then we started to involve. And involve was the search for the God within. So we now involve, as opposed to evolve. Evolving is physical, involving is spiritual. The Jet column is the J, the courage to think, speak, and do ma'at. Truth, justice, reciprocity, balance, integrity, honor, and merit. The Egyptian concept of love and its unspeakable. You know when you love somebody and you say, I love you so much words could never express? That's murder. And quite frankly, don't try to express it. Because there is no expression for that love. The comma represents Tahuti, the pause to reflect the knowledge of the universe. The equal sign equals the duat, the crossing over back into the moon, and 0 equals amenta, returning to the G. Amen means the hidden, ta means land. Amenta is the hidden lands of the fertile waters that return you back from whence you came. And that's where we're all going to end up one day. However, in understanding centripetal force and centrifugal force, we understand the role of gravity and light. The idea of centripetal force causes a body to traveling around the center to be drawing towards the center. Centrifugal force is that you're traveling around the center, but it pushes you away. So the idea of away and attraction creates you in light and in gravity, and that's what Einstein was looking for in his general law of relativity. Now, family, I know I've expressed this in a matter of 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. And I look forward to coming back because really I teach this on a much more extended level where, I mean, we just get really deep into it, but the one thing that I want us to walk away from is this. In every one of our homes, we ought to have a telescope and a microscope so that our children can see the outer world and they can see the inner world. They can see the law of relativity and they can see the quantum physics. The microscope allows them to see the small world, the telescope, and can I tell you something else for many of our children? Don't start with an expensive telescope. Don't try to get a telescope that helps them see the Andromeda. That's the moon is all right to start with. You know? Because a lot of times we get very excited, we go out and spend $250, $300 on a telescope. You don't need that right now. Just the idea of being able to see is enough for the children now. Okay? And also, One of the other things that I work with is the idea of imaging. What we have to do is we have to start to create images for our children to see their world. Right now in kindergarten, first grade, our children count bears and balloons, okay? And I've come in contact with a company that has Kamene pieces to it. We need our children to be, the images need now to be Kamene images, where they can see King Tut, they can see the pyramids, they can see the falcon. And this way, when you're putting those images in their head, this is what they're remembering, this is what they're counting, okay? They can start counting their images as opposed to someone else's values, interests, and principles. And what I'm saying is that even what we can do is go into a magazine and we can take out pictures of Malcolm X and we can Xerox copy them and put 10 pictures of Malcolm on a picture and ask them to count how many pictures of Malcolm are on the page. See, you can do this on a lot of different levels. It don't take a lot of money. You can take Madam C.J. Walker. You can take any of the great heroes of Shiros. You can take any of the images and you can put them on paper. But the idea is that we have to inundate our children with the images that reflect them as opposed to images that reflect someone else. And then once we start to do that, we need to go out and make sure with our sister Cachet, as it relates to the book on melanin, and as it relates to the idea of melanin in the skin and melanin in the senses. Those are the types of books that we need to be reading to our children. Let me say one last thing, and time didn't allow me to get too deep into it, but I have a whole piece on this, but I'm going to share this with you anyway. The future of wealth in the world is in solar power. Solar power is the future of the wealth in the world. Okay, understand this. We need to start introducing the sun. We can go and get a book on the sun. Begin by just letting the children know the parts of the sun. Okay? There is a series of books that was written that I've gotten on solar power. Okay? Solar power. Teaching our children about solar power. I was working in Sacramento. There's a group that actually goes out and teaches children how to make solar panels in attaché cases. And they're going around developing, charging up and using energy of these attaché cases. It's really a powerful, so there are folk out here doing this. I'd like to talk to brother, and maybe this brother could come in and formulate solar power groups. Solar power is the wealth of the future. And isn't it a wonderful thing that everywhere where the sun shines the brightest, the people are the most melanated? It's like the Creator gave us the wealth of the future. Here's a book on solar power. Here's another book on harnessing. Invent ways to harness energy and nature. This is where we're going to be. We're getting up. Let me tell you a story. In Oklahoma, there's a particular area of Oklahoma that have been having severe earthquakes. And what they came to find out is that in the peripheral areas of where the earthquakes are occurring, people are mining for oil and for natural gas. And what they're finding is that the earth is volatile. It's like when you stick your finger down your throat. That's what we're doing when we drill. And what's happening is that the earth now is regurgitating peristalsis. It's called reverse peristalsis scientifically. Wade Noble calls it phallic. But that's what's happening. We have to get up off the earth. We have to go back to our ancestors when they were deriving solar power. Capstone Books has a series of books where there's a brother, his name is Max Axiom. And Max Axiom, there's a series of about 29 books that one of them is the scientific method, energy, well, the ones I deal with solar power, renewable energy, light, electricity, and magnetism. The future of the planet, the wealth of the planet is in solar power. If we can start to introduce our children to solar power, words like photovoltaics, solar cell, introduce these words to them, help them understand, then we can develop an entire generation of children who will know how to capitalize on the future wealth of the planet. Because to try to train them to get jobs where there are no jobs. They have an automated McDonald's in Manhattan where ain't no people work there. You can order McDonald's on takeout. You just drive up and you order it. You just punch it up. Big Mac come out, all sorts of stuff come out. Crack Donald got it going on. Crack Donald, Murder King, Haunted Castle, they're all of this. So the idea that I'm trying to present, family, is that looking practically at the future, solar power. Solar power is the future. Developing photovoltaics. Photo, light, voltaics is electricity. What comes from light? The electricity comes from light. That's the future. And that's what we have to bring in to our children to help them understand this and to introduce them to the sciences. Family, thank you so much. I really Brother Marcus, it's on you, brother.
Appreciate everyone coming out. Hopefully you signed the email list because we have a few more speakers coming. Need to come by and support. African Strong Hands about Kaba.